Wow, 580 Sports Talk going up on a Tuesday. Back after the long weekend. Brendan Dworzinski, Dan Lucero, Spencer Dupuis, all here with you today. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Hopefully, you got to enjoy a 3-day holiday weekend. Or if not, if you were, unfortunately, one of the many folks who had to work yesterday, hope you took some time to, do something fun. Enjoy yourself. Treat yourself a little bit during the President's Day weekend. Plenty to get to today on 580 Sports Talk. We are done a little bit early today. We'll be off somewhere in the neighborhood of 5:30 because we've got our final regular season edition of Lewis Toyota Tuesday Night Hoops here on 580 WIBW. Not Centennial League. Last week it was all Centennial League action. UKC action coming up tonight as Seaman takes on Shawnee Heights.
Yeah, great rivalry, one of the city's best. And we had the first games of the year between the T-Birds and the Vikings at Seaman back on January 12th. So we'll get the rematches tonight, the penultimate game for both teams in the regular season here, games 19 out of 20 for all four teams involved. So lots at stake. Seaman girls can clinch the outright UKC championship with a win tonight. That should be a matchup of top 10 teams, both ranked in the KBCA 5A top 10. So that should be a great one. Boys game. Boy, who's hotter than Shawnee Heights? 15-1 in their last 16.
Crazy.
Red hot. Shawnee Heights Thunderbirds. They're a top 10 team as well. So going to be some great action tonight from the gym we affectionately refer to as the Birdcage. Looking at 5:30 tip for the girls game, boys to follow. So we'll be on the air 5:15, 5:30-ish with the pregame show.
So we are looking forward to that coming up today here on 580 Sports Talk. Up until then, though, we would love to hear from you. 785-272-9429 is the text line number. And, of course, the YouTube stream as well. Head to youtube.com, search 580 Sports Talk. Subscribe to our channel while you're there. You can hang out in the comment section, watch along with the live stream today. Also live streaming on the 580 Sports Talk Twitter page and on Facebook, where you can go to WIBW News and watch us live there today. We're talking plenty of Chiefs in this opening hour of the show. We will also get to the good, bad, and ugly from the long weekend coming up here in just a little bit this hour. We'll talk some K-State hoops. Yikes, man. It's getting worse. Really, they fought, and it wasn't a complete blowout. K-State covered the spread last night. It's like we're talking late stage Weber offense at this point. Like it's gruesome to watch this offense try to play.
Yeah, they're not a lot of fun to watch. I've had that sort of realization over the last couple of weeks that this is not a particularly enjoyable basketball team to watch right now. And it, again, is not, I don't think, for lack of effort. And I really don't think it's a coaching issue either. I just think, they don't have the horses for the course. They do not have pieces that fit together to run a coherent offense.
So we'll talk some K-State coming up in the 3 o'clock hour today. Matt Verderame is going to join us. Didn't talk to him yesterday because of the day off. So we'll talk to Matt today about all things going on around the NFL. We'll also talk to Michael Swain coming up at the bottom of the 4 o'clock hour today for Jayhawk Weekly. I was cleaning out my apartment. My wife and I are moving here, so I've had to do a lot of cleaning. I came across a great piece from when Michael and I were co-workers as students at KU. Did you know once upon a time a arts and culture writer as a student Michael Swain was?
Is that right?
Yeah, we're gonna see how much he remembers about the time he eulogized former Lincoln Park frontman Chester Benningfield in the University Daily Kansas.
Bennington.
Yeah.
You're thinking of Natasha Benningfield.
Yes, because earlier today,
unwritten.
yes, because Bradley J mentioned that song to me today. We were talking about something today, and he brought up that song, Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield, today.
Now I want to hear Lincoln Park do Unwritten.
There was probably one of those
or do I want to hear Natasha Bedingfield do Numb? Which one do I want to hear more?
I'm sure that was at some point brought up during one of the planning sessions for those rock does pop albums or pop does rock albums. I'm sure that came up at some point.
Hey, if they were Linkin Park were Jay-Z in their prime.
That's what I was about to say. I still can't believe Linkin Park and Jay-Z had a collab at one point in time.
And it was awesome.
And live concerts in that.
It worked and it rocked and it was very good. They're not above working with Natasha Bedingfield though.
Yeah, so Michael once wrote a piece about Chester Bennington after he had passed away for our student paper at KU. So I'm curious to see if he remembers that, because if he doesn't, I have proof. It is in my office right now. I have a physical copy of that paper sitting in my office. So Michael will join us in the 4 o'clock hour today. We'll get to our 580 Sports Talk headlines. We've got What Is Wrong With You. We've also got Random Question Tuesday, plus, as I mentioned, a day late version of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Your texts and your comments on the YouTube or Facebook streams throughout the course of the show today. The offseason is here for the NFL. We'll talk some Royals baseball, by the way. I missed that. We're going to talk some Royals baseball because while the NFL offseason is here, spring training has begun.
Yes, there is a baseball game, like 9 innings, 3 strikes, 4 balls, 3 outs, all those things. Take me out to the old ball game. There is a baseball game involving the Royals on Friday.
Yeah.
A Cactus League game, but still, it's real life baseball. It's here.
They will keep score.
Yes, they will be keeping score, and you can follow it on MLB.com or ESPN or however you like to follow it. The Boys of Summer are returning. It's going to be in the 60s all week here. It's going to start to feel like spring. Like, it's baseball season.
And there's a lot of excitement for the Royals. And again, we'll touch on that coming up in the 4 o'clock hour today. But also some excitement for this Chiefs offseason, because every offseason feels a little bit easier, a little bit better when you've won a championship. And well, I'm not in the camp that if your team won a title, you are not allowed to complain for a certain number of years. I don't subscribe to that belief. I do think, and I would assume for Chiefs fans for the next few years, at least next year or two, there's probably an element of, shucks, like we missed out on that guy, or we only got to the AFC Championship game. There's probably a little bit more of that going forward, but there's a lot of excitement for this offseason because there's a lot of opportunity because the Chiefs just won a title with a flawed roster. So what happens if you can plug up some of those holes going forward and have a better roster going forward? So I wanted to get the three of us to come up with a few things each that are on the wish list for the Chiefs this offseason. And not necessarily talking about, we have to manage the cap here, or one of the things on my wish list is to convert part of Patrick Mahomes' salary to sign him. No, I don't want to talk about that. Not interested in that. I'm interested in the big dreams, the big thoughts. What do you want the Chiefs to add? What sort of positions do you want the Chiefs to address or figure out? What sort of positions or players do you want to go after in the draft? If you want to sign a specific free agent, that's good with me. So, Dan, I will let you go first. Your number one thing on your Chiefs wish list, whether it's conceptual, specific player, specific position, what is number one on the offseason wish list for you?
I mean, they just won a Super Bowl despite having the most drops of any team in the league. They're the first team ever to win a Super Bowl while also leading the league in drops. So I think this is a pretty obvious one, but go get a reliable number 2 wide receiver, because I think Rashee Rice, even though he may not fit the mold of a number 1, the way that like you look at certain guys and they look the part, like a Chase or a Jefferson, guys like that, I think you've got to go get a number 2 option. And I think there's going to be some really appealing options at the bottom of the draft. And I think that's where I'd go at number 32. If they could get like an A.D. Mitchell from Texas, or a Xavier Worthy from Texas, or a Troy Franklin from Oregon with the 32nd overall pick, somebody with those kinds of physical tools to line up at wide receiver that I think is going to be able to, from day one, get open and beat man coverage and be reliable to go with whatever Kelsey gives you moving forward, and also what Rashee Rice develops into in his second season. To me, that's a no-brainer. That's the piece that will get the offense back on track after what was a, by and large, disappointing season for the offense.
Yeah, and a year that up until we got to the playoffs, I mean, the biggest complaint was about this pass catcher group. That's number 1 for me, too, is to go out and find someone else who can be a reliable pass catcher. Did you have something receiver related for you too?
Yeah. I've mentioned this on the show before. I mentioned this to you often. Curtis Samuel. Go give me Curtis Samuel. I think he could be a welcome addition to this team and play not only the receiver role, but a Sky Moore-ish role, I guess you would say.
The role that was intended
Debo
for Sky
role.
Moore, but actually a useful player.
Yeah.
Like, I think that makes sense. I get it.
Because I don't think Washington's going to re-sign Curtis Samuel.
No, I don't think so.
I think you can get him at a decent number, because I think his contract that he signed when he went to Washington, he didn't live up to the hype of his contract just because he was injured, but he had a good season last year. And I think you could get him and you could stay under, kind of a budget that you're looking for.
That specific player, by the way, right in the Brett Veach wheelhouse. He was the top 40 pick back in 2017. What does Brett Veach love? Reclamation projects with early picks, guys, especially in the first round. But he's done it with a couple of second rounders too, like Darren Lee, which didn't work out, but same kind of principle. So the next question there is, are you going after, and I guess, Dan, you sort of answered this with your point about a guy like A.D. Mitchell, who I really like as a player. Do you go after a guy who you think can be an immediate superstar splash receiver, whether that's a draft pick, whether that is a free agent, or do you, again, try to go with guys who are more complementary, supplementary pieces? I think Samuel falls in that category. He's not a star, but if you're looking for a guy who does things that you don't already have, I think that makes sense.
I think your big financial outlays this offseason are going to be one or both of Jones and Snead.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that necessarily the money's going to be there for like a Mike Evans or maybe even for a Curtis Samuel. It might be somebody who is maybe later in the offseason. They're a June 1st cut. I've seen some speculation that Tyler Lockett could be a player like that. Longtime Seattle Seahawk, obviously former Kansas State Wildcat. Still, I think, has some deep ball ability, certainly, and the ability to work his way open, a good route runner, a veteran piece that could be available later on in the offseason. So I don't think that you're getting star-level production or even number 2 level production necessarily on the free agent market if you're the Chiefs at wide receiver. I think if you're going to find that guy, it's going to be via the draft. And luckily for the Chiefs, this is a crazy deep wide receiver draft.
It is. Yeah. I mean, there's talent, especially, I would say especially deep at the top this year when you've got guys like Johnson and Harrison and Neighbors and Adunze. But I think there are going to be a ton of guys when you get to the back, not even the back part of the draft, but day 2 of the draft, those second, third round guys. There's a lot of talent there. I look at a guy like Malachi Corley, who I know is someone that a bunch of my buddies who cover the Packers, they really like for him. Again, sort of in the Adunze mold where he's more of an athlete, whereas, you look at Marvin Harrison Jr., and obviously he is a phenomenal athlete as well, but you think of him as like a true number 1 wide receiver, whereas a Corley or an Adunze are guys you can put in so many different roles because of their athletic ability. They can do so many different things. I would look more in the camp of go get someone who fills a specific role, like a Samuel, like some of the guys you can draft, especially a little bit later on in the draft this year. I don't think you need to go with that number 1 guy. Now, by the same token, if you could make something work on a 3-year deal with Mike Evans, 2 years with an option on the 3rd year, would I say no? No, I would absolutely take that. I'm just saying, I don't think you need to go get Mike Evans or T. Higgins for this to be considered a successful offseason at receiver for the Chiefs. And Bradley on YouTube adds as well, he thinks Lockett is a perfect fit when it comes to the cap as well. We'll talk a little about the cap situation for the Chiefs in a few moments. I didn't want to focus too much on that while we're talking about these big picture wants and needs for the Chiefs to add. So we'll get to the cap. But I agree. Lockett's such an interesting case because he is straight up said he never expected to play for this long. He did not expect that he was going to be in the NFL until he was 30. He's going to turn 32 this coming season. And I still think he's got something left in the tank. I think there's certainly something left in the tank, in fact. And he's been a really good receiver for years now. He took a bit of a dip this year, and I know the Seahawks offense as a whole took a bit of a dip this year. But prior to that, he had been over 1,000 yards pretty consistently 4 straight years. 19 through 22, played 16 games in every one of those seasons, went over 1,000 yards in all of them, and had at least 8 touchdowns in all of them. That's a really useful receiver. Now, the Chiefs don't usually like to go old, especially when it comes to free agent signings, unless you're getting a guy for a 1-year deal. Maybe Lockett is a 1-year deal kind of guy, and it doesn't happen until later in free agency, that second or third wave of free agents. But there are a lot of options out there, and the fact that it is a deep draft along with an okay wide receiver pool in free agency, I don't think it's great. It's probably not as bad as I once assumed it was. There are going to be at least a handful of decent options out there. I still think the move for the Chiefs is going to be 1 free agent, 1 draft pick. I do think that's going to make the most sense because a free agent, Higgins is probably the only guy who's going to get a long-term deal. Like we're talking 4 or 5 years. Like a Samuel or a Boyd or even an Evans, a Lockett, a guy like that, you're probably looking at 1 or 2 years, and maybe one of those is even an option year. So I think a draft pick to set yourself up long-term along with Rice, a veteran right now to establish the wide receiver core. I still think that's the best move for the Chiefs, and that's what I would do in terms of wide receiver. Outside of the receiver group, what else would be on your offseason wish list for this team?
Figure out your defensive back core. What are you going to do with Snead? Are you going to franchise tag him? Or are you going to try to get a long-term deal done? Because when you franchise tag somebody, if I'm not mistaken, you have a certain amount of time.
Correct.
Was it right before the season, right?
You have until mid-June.
Mid-June. Okay.
Yeah, you have it's essentially 3 months from the start of the league year. So what is that, March 13th this year? So you have about 3 months from there to get a deal done.
So you franchise tag him, you figure out what you're going to do at the back end, because you got a lot of depth guys, I think, that are free agents. If I'm not mistaken, Bush is a free agent.
Deion Bush is, yep.
They have their rights free agency with Najee Johnson, who I saw on Twitter the other day is getting back up rehab wise.
He's looking good.
So figure out what you're going to do at that DB in that DB positions. I think obviously re-sign Snead or at best franchise tag him, and then figure out the rest of the depth there, because the depth proved to be big during the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's huge. And I'm sure that this is why, and we'll talk more about the savvy nature of the Chiefs front office coming up in a few minutes here, but this is why it pays to have not just a great GM, but scouts and money guys and other business guys in the front office. When you talk about front office, it's not just GM and owner. There's so much more that goes into it. And the Chiefs have had as good of a whole holistic front office as anybody. And I'm sure, because we have past examples of this, going into the Super Bowl 54 win, the next year when they reassembled pretty much the exact same team with a little outside help to get back to Super Bowl 55, building to get to last year's game, winning it again this year. They have the trends. They know what it takes to win. They know all of the specifics. And it is clear that depth in two places, offensive line and in the secondary, have paid major dividends for the Chiefs over time. Or alternately, they learned they need those things because they didn't have it at some certain moment. Those are going to be huge assets, I think, for the Chiefs going forward. So I'm with you. I think figuring out what your depth there looks like is going to be crucial because, Brian Cook is coming back from a severe injury. He didn't get to play most of the back part of this season. Mike Edwards is a free agent. That's a huge one.
Yeah.
I would bring Mike Edwards back for another year. I would do, if he's willing to take a 1-year deal, the Chiefs are going to have enough flexibility with the cap. I'm bringing back Mike Edwards. I thought he was an awesome signing for this team this year. So I'm with you there. I think you need to make sure that gets settled down. For me, the next biggest one, you've got to figure out your long-term plan at tackle. And I know that the Chiefs are going to have some decisions to make on the offensive line in general. Creed Humphrey can get an extension this year. Trey Smith can get an extension this year. Joe Thuney, you really can't move on from him. And why would you want to move on from Joe Thuney at this point, even with the injury? That's not, I don't think, going to be a long-term thing that drags into next season, even with surgery. What do you do with your tackle spots? Juwan Taylor is locked in. You've got him, no doubt, for the next 3 years, right? So that's not, or at least 2 years, maybe you finagle the third, whatever. He's locked in long-term. So far as your right tackle, you could possibly move him to left, which, as we expected going into last year, or this past season, was going to be the plan. Then Donovan Smith becomes available. You sign him, move Taylor back to right. We all know the story from there. Is Juwan Taylor your left tackle or your right tackle? Does that depend on who else you get to be your other starting tackle? Is that Wanye Morris? It might be. He had some moments where you thought, yeah, this guy can be a starter in this league. There are also moments where you thought, oh my God, he is getting completely overwhelmed. Being beaten as a rookie, you get. Being totally overwhelmed, that's a little bit more concerning. So you've got to figure out, is Morris the guy? And maybe that's the first step of this, Spencer, is figuring out, can Wanye Morris be your starting left tackle? Because if that's the case, then you're set for the next 3 years. Because it's Wanye Morris, who's on his rookie deal for 3 more seasons, and it's Juwan Taylor left and right, respectively. If it's not going to be Wanye Morris, and you've got to look at the guys who are available in the draft, you've got to look at guys who are available in free agency this year. Do you consider making a trade? You don't have a lot of picks this year if you're the Chiefs, so there's not a ton you can move in terms of draft capital to go and get someone if you wanted to make a trade for a starting tackle. But that's the biggest thing to me, is figuring out, what does that pairing look like over the long term. Because if you get that settled out, I think the rest of the offensive line will fall into place.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. But I have another one on the defensive side of the ball.
Let's do it.
Figure out your front seven, because that is hugely implicated in the free agency.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have Drew Tranquil, who signed that 1-year deal. He won a Super Bowl, played a big part in it. What is he going to do? Is he going to want to come back, or how are they going to be just out of the pay range that he can get? I mean, that's a huge question, because Willie Gay likely not coming back. You got Jack Cochran also going to be a free agent, but then there's that defensive line spot: Chris Jones, Derek Nottie, Tershawn Wharton, Mike Dana, Malik Herring. They're all free agents as well. So you really got to figure out what you're going to do in that front seven.
Yeah, I think my other one on the defensive side of the ball would be, I don't want to say more depth. I think the Chiefs actually showed they had pretty good depth on the edge this year, but you can never have too much. And especially if you are going to lose Chris Jones, that is one of the hardest things in the NFL to replace: pass pressure from the interior. There are very few guys, and a lot of them are scheme specific, either a 3-4 nose or a 3-4-3 technique, or a guy who is built to be on the inside of a 4-3 even front. It is hard to replace that kind of pressure. There are very few guys in the league. Frankly, only one guy at his peak in the league right now who could rush the way Chris Jones does. But even if you look at a Christian Wilkins or a Dexter Lawrence, guys who are above average to very good at interior pressure, it's hard to find those guys. So if you're not able to replace that kind of production up front from Chris Jones, then what do you need to find? You need to find ways to produce off the edge from elsewhere. Charles Omenihu is probably going to miss the start of the season after tearing his ACL going into the Super Bowl.
Probably a big portion of the season, and that takes out, so between free agency and Omenihu, that takes out their whole, that if you look on the depth chart, that defensive end line.
Yeah, so you're going to miss him for at least part of the season. You've got George. He's a stud. Not worried about George Karlaftis at all. Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Are the expectations going to be higher next year? Yes. Is the ceiling high, the potential high? Yes, absolutely. You drafted him with the last pick of the first round for a reason, right? So you've got higher expectations for him going into the year, hopefully with a full year in the Chiefs system. He's been able to bulk up, add some weight, work on the technique a little bit. You can rely on him to be a second or third pass rusher, but you need more after that. So I'm with you. Adding depth and adding some stability on the edge, knowing that you're probably going to have to make up either for the loss of Chris Jones and or the loss of all your depth pieces on the edge. That is a big deal, I think, for this team. We've got one here from Bradley on YouTube who says on his wish list, Ben Sinnott, the tight end from K-State. I'm going to guess between our Tyler Lockett comment here and the Ben Sinnott comment as well. I think, Bradley, if I had to guess, you're a K-State fan. Ben Sinnott as your tight end to replace Travis Kelce down the line, 3rd or 4th round. Sinnott is a fascinating draft prospect to me because I have seen people who say he should be your first tight end off the board. He has that kind of athletic profile, that sort of ability, that flexibility to line up in different places, line him up in the backfield, in line, outside. People who want him as soon as like top 60, maybe like somewhere in the late 2nd round would be willing to draft him. I've seen people who say that he's a 6th or 7th rounder at best, and that there is a lot to like. There's also a lot to not so much like about the way he plays, how much he plays to his size, etc.
I've got one more quick one. Who is going to be your second string change of pace running back? Jerick McKinnon, what are you going to do with him? And obviously Edwards-Helaire kind of on his way out of this team. I mean, he just doesn't seem to be that effective. So where are you going? Because you have those two guys as free agents and you only have one other running back that is on the roster.
Yeah, are you going to? I would think that's probably a draft pick if I had to guess.
Yeah, that's a late, probably 5th, 6th rounder. I think you could probably get a steal there.
I mean, are we thinking, and I need to double check where the Chiefs picks are this year, but like, go get me Blake Corum. Go get me Blake Corum on day 3 of the draft.
Will he be available though?
I think so. This is a pretty good draft for running, or give me, Jonathan Brooks, who is going to have to he's going to recover from his ACL injury. But if you could get him fairly fresh back part of the season, you ride with Deneric Prince or, one of the other guys who's just been around on the practice squad first few weeks of the season, I think you can make that work at the running back spot too. A lot of reason to be excited about this Chiefs group going into the offseason. And we'll talk about the flexibility they've got regarding the salary cap coming up next as we get started on this Tuesday edition of 580 Sports Talk. City Sports Talk just getting started on this Tuesday, February 20th. Brendan Dworzynski, Spencer Dupuis with you in studio right now. Dan Lucero will be back in just a minute. On assignment. Top secret business. He'll be back with us coming up here in just a minute. I mentioned that we would get to some chatter about the cap for the Chiefs going into this offseason. And look, I'll be honest with you. A lot of salary cap talk I find to be frustrating in general. Not this topic. I wouldn't talk about something intentionally that bothers me. But I feel like we have gotten, as a football watching public, so into making everything feel like Madden or getting to play general manager that we sort of blow off the other context and details that are important to team building. For example, I saw a piece from NFL.com just yesterday that was about potential cap casualties around the league. And one of them, and we use our favorite teams as a point of reference. I know you do so with the Commanders, Dan with the Seahawks, myself with the Packers. Said Aaron Jones, running back. 29 or about to turn 29. He was banged up part of this year. He makes X amount of money. Yeah, Packers will probably move on from him. Well, one, the Packers front office has already said, general manager Brian Gutekunst has already said he's the heartbeat of our team. We expect him to be back. But also, he's very important to the offense. He serves a big role in the offense. Teammates love him. He is a leader for the team. Those things are factored in. So when people just throw out there, cap casualty. And I'm guilty of this. I've said this about MVS since he got signed. Certainly all throughout this year, and especially when he was playing poorly. I said, MVS is getting cut. I think it was you who brought up the other day, well, is it possible that he doesn't get cut? And I would say, I still think he will. Now, I'm willing to back it up and say, here are the reasons why. I think, save for 4 games, now granted, they all came in the playoffs over the last 2 years, MVS has been a disappointment for the Chiefs. He has not been all that great. I don't think he has performed up to being the highest paid wide receiver that the Chiefs have. That is why I would move on. I think you can do right by him and let him go early so he can start looking for a team before free agency begins. I think you say, hey, thank you. I just think financially it makes sense. The combination of the financials of it, along with the fact that MVS has not lived up to his contract during regular season play, makes it understandable that you can move on. It's probably not fair to go straight in and say, yep, you're getting cut this guy, restructure here. Okay, you're done. Because I think that removes the human element that is important to team building and maintaining good relationships in the NFL. Now, all of that said, important details there. The Chiefs are in a fairly good spot with their cap going into this year. The fine folks over at Arrowhead Pride did a great write-up about this. Jared Sapp, specifically, over at Arrowhead Pride, broke down what the salary cap situation will look like for the Chiefs. If the salary cap sits at about $242.5 million, $242.5. That is the current estimated salary cap going into next year.
They just put it up to 250.
So that was a report from Mike Florio. It could go up to 250. I was going to get to there. That the current estimation, if you say the average amount the cap goes up every year, if that goes up by the same amount this year, the Chiefs will have about $15 million to work with. If it goes up as high as $250 million, which is what Mike Florio reported the other day, well, then the Chiefs suddenly have over $23 million to work with before they cut anybody. So they don't even have to cut MVS there. They don't have to restructure Joe Tooney or add a year extension or a void year onto him to spread out some of his cap hit. You've got $23 million there free and clear to work with. Plus, you could restructure Travis Kelce, add a couple years of an extension, do something to keep Travis Kelce's cap hit flat. And you've always got Patrick Mahomes, who you could restructure his contract. Does that make things more difficult at the end of the deal? Sure it does. Do you care? Honestly, probably not. Because he's Patrick Mahomes. He's won all of this for you. You're planning to keep him throughout the duration of his career. You don't have to worry about something like that. Now, you could still cut MVS. So even if you've got $23 million here, you could cut MVS and save another 12. All of a sudden, boom, you've got 35 to work with. There's probably another couple of guys so you could restructure. Maybe you say thanks, but no thanks for moving on. Suddenly, that's going to end up freeing up more cap space. So that brings me to a general question then for you, Spencer. The Chiefs are not the kind of team. They're not, the Browns of the previous Browns era, well, really about 25 years. They're not necessarily one of those teams that always goes out and spends huge dollars in free agency so that they can say, we won free agency. Look at us. Look at these splash moves. The Jaguars a couple years ago, they were a team that was just like that. The Chiefs aren't that kind of franchise, and that has paid off because they've won 3 Super Bowls in 5 years, and they've been to 4 of them. How aggressive, though, do you think the Chiefs will be in pursuing free agents this year? Because I think the Chiefs will probably try to add some draft picks moving back on draft day. But how aggressive do you think they will be to actually try to add a wide receiver, to add depth at defensive end, to add another tackle, whatever it might end up being? Do you think this is going to be a let's spend every dollar we have, let's restructure Mahomes to free up money, let's cut an extra guy to save some money to make a big move? Or do you think this is going to be a little bit more of a toned down approach to free agency this year?
I think it'll be a mix of both. I think they have to narrow down what they're going to do at specific positions before we can predict this now, but there's still 3 weeks until the legal tampering period begins.
20 days. 3 weeks from yesterday.
Okay, so basically 3 weeks, and I think that it just depends on if that salary. They need to know where the salary cap's going to be, I think, before they want to do all that.
What it needs to be allocated to before they know how much they can actually spend. I think that makes sense.
Because you can just go around throwing all these numbers like, oh, well, they need to clean up this amount of space by doing this, or this. But you need to figure out what it's going to be. I think you have multiple plans. Your front office is working tirelessly throughout the offseason to figure out what each plans are. And I think they have multiple plans for what the salary cap could be. I do think they might go out and get a receiver more aggressively than they have in the past. I think they maybe get, your not necessarily your top receiver available, but a top 5-6 receiver available if they want to go that way. And I think they need to figure out what Chris Jones really wants to do, because the intoxication of him saying he wants to be here, how true is that? Because I think that depends on how you go through free agency. You need to have a talk with him and his agent to see we know you said this, and we know you said this while you were intoxicated, and we know that this may not work out, obviously, but what is your lowest dollar, basically? What do you think we can give you to still be a competitive team? Because I think it all starts with what are you going to do with Chris Jones? Because if he gives a number and they start negotiating and it's just too high for them, then they're going to probably go find some defensive end help.
I think the Chris Jones situation, more so than L'Jarius Sneed, is going to dictate what happens with the Chiefs offseason. Because let's say Chris Jones tells his agents to kick rocks. Says, Katz brothers, get the hell out of here. I do not care what you think. I'm going to be a Chief. I'm going to make sure they give me as much as they're willing to give me, but I am going to be a Chief. Okay, you're probably keeping L'Jarius Sneed either on the tag or you're signing him to an extension because he's been that good. He's got a great relationship with Steve Spagnuolo and Andy Reid. He's such an integral part of this defense. So let's assume you're using the cap or the franchise tag on L'Jarius Sneed, just as an example. And you're going to keep Chris Jones at a number that you are content with, but it's the maximum you are willing to spend. You're probably in a position where you can't go out and spend a ton of money, like you illustrated, on a receiver, a tackle, an edge rusher, whatever, in which case you've got to be much smarter about the pieces you go after. So I would imagine you're probably then looking at more of those reclamation projects, like a Curtis Samuel, who's the name you brought up. So I think there are a few different ways the Chiefs can approach this offseason. I think it is beneficial that they've got all of this. Right now it might not be a ton of cap space, but if you just won a Super Bowl and you are going into an offseason with anywhere between $15.5 and $23.5 million in cap space available, then you got to give tons and tons of credit to your front office for being able to do that. One follow-up I want to get to real quick. Our guy Bradley on YouTube, I mentioned, Ben Bradley's a K-State fan. Well, he says this, so I'm not just a K-Stater, but Ben Sinnott's from Iowa, and tight ends from Iowa, they seem to do a pretty good job more often than not. Yeah, that's true. That's certainly true.
I would say, too, if you cut MVS, you get how much money?
About 12.
I think that's going to happen. That's straight up going to happen. And they're going to be like, this is nothing against you. This is just thank you for being there down the stretch.
Mhm.
We're open to having you back if you would like to come back on a lesser deal.
On a lesser number. No, I think, and again, I think the Chiefs
It's the
will
business of the NFL.
I think the Chiefs will do right by him. And if he ends up getting cut, I think he will be cut long before the start of free agency so that he can go find someone. Because I think they'll say, hey, thank you so much. Thank you for all the memories. We want you to go get one last big contract. So we're going to give you an opportunity to go out before everyone else hits the market to try to find it. We will recap the long holiday weekend with the good, the bad, and the ugly coming up right after this on 580 Sports Talk. We've got an extra day to recap off a 3-day weekend in the good, the bad, and the ugly. Brendan, Dan, and Spencer here with you. Dan, why don't you go first? What was your good from the long weekend?
Good was I had to go to work yesterday. That was pretty sick. Enjoyed a day off. We were a little busy Sunday. We were helping a coworker of my wife's load up a couch, used couch, bring it to their new house that they're renting. So had a little project going on Sunday. So yesterday it was nice to just kind of sit and relax. I watched first 2 episodes of that the Dynasty about the Patriots.
Patriot show.
Apple TV Plus. I regret to inform the people that it is good. That it is an entertaining watch. The episodes are only like a half hour. So I was not going to sit through 10 hours of Patriots content.
I heard it's like legit though. It's not just like, hey, we're going to go and talk about the good. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah,
literally.
It does really seem like they're going to actually kind of dig in on these guys, these personalities. And I'm looking forward to that. The first 2 episodes are just basically, we're not even to the first Super Bowl yet. Like after the first 2 episodes, but it's good. It was entertaining. I have to say I enjoyed it. Got dust off the old sticks, play a little PS5. Just enjoyed a day off. It was nice to to have a dad. Watch Daytona.
Yeah, that was a heck of a race.
Watch the racing. Just when I was starting to think, man, this is a clean race, other than the disaster at the beginning. It's a nice, clean race. And then the end was just a total cluster.
And then we got the big one.
Yeah, the big one, and then the stupid finish with the finish under caution.
Yeah,
very dumb. I'm not savvy.
Race
enough.
it out.
I'm not savvy enough a race car guy to have understood. I had to enlist the help of my brother-in-law. He's a big NASCAR guy. I said, "Hey man, what just happened? Like, what's going on?"
When I had a phase in junior high and high school where I was really into NASCAR, and I'm not like that now. But I feel the same way about it that I feel about boxing or UFC at this point. Like, I just like the feel of a big event. Like,
yes.
Like it's Daytona. Like that's big.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
I follow IndyCar for approximately 4 hours a year, and it is during the Indy 500.
Yeah.
Like a big fight, a big UFC card, like that gets me going, even if it's not my thing.
Yeah. So I did. I enjoyed the ability to have the day off and just kind of to lounge about. That was my good.
You're good, Spencer?
Had a little bit of extra time this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Still had to, work, but we'll take it, whatever. I will say, you guys know I'm a big network TV guy.
Yeah.
I talk about it frequently on the show.
I believe it was your
final
final word on Friday.
Yeah. I've always been, since I was a kid and I watched it with my dad, a big NCIS fan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And last night they did a tribute episode to David McCollum, who was in Jag, Man from U.N.C.L.E. Just a great actor.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a very well put together memorial episode for him. And, shout out to them for getting it right when a lot of TV shows can just gloss over things.
Yeah, he's a heck of an actor. He was on that show from the very beginning, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. My good from the weekend, it could have given her good over and over and over again. The best player on the best team in women's JUCO basketball is from the city of Topeka. Were you aware of that?
Yes, I was.
The Topeka High product, Kiki Smith, who I know at one point was a D1 commit, ended up going the JUCO route instead. Hutch is undefeated this year. They are 25-0 and 19-0 in the Jayhawk conference. They are the number one team in America in Division I JUCO basketball, and she is their leading scorer and also averages 3+ rebounds, 2.5 assists, and 2.5 steals a game. She is unbelievable. 4 times has been Conference Player of the Week this year. So, yeah, best JUCO player in the country? Among the best?
Yeah.
Right here from Topeka.
Certainly on a short list.
No kidding.
No doubt about that.
You're bad?
Bad from the weekend. I'm going to say that the bad, I don't know if I had a bad, to be honest.
That's
with
good.
You. It was
a good weekend.
I say the bad was, and we're going to get into K-State a little bit here in a little bit, but it never felt like they were going to win that game. And that's a drag. Like, even from the very start, it did not feel like they actually were going to win that game. And they played tight. Like, it was ended up being a 6-point game. Like, they had an opportunity to make it a, 1 possession game there at the end, but no, it just never really felt like they were going to win. And that's just emblematic of the larger problems this team has. And this season's on life support. And after what they did last year, that's a bummer.
You have a bad, Spencer?
Probably turn my mic back on. So it was a good weekend for the Habitat for Humanity Restore in Topeka. Bad weekend for me because I had about 3 things I saw online, and by the time I got there Saturday at like 11:30 a.m., they were gone.
Oh,
so I had about 3 things I was looking at. I brought a tape measure with me, all prepared to figure out how I was going to fit in my apartment.
It ghosted you.
And great weekend for them because they sold a bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, not a great weekend for me when it came to acquiring things. But
got some TV trays.
Some TV trays, which are going to hold me over to table till June. Shout out to Dan again hooking me up.
My bad from the weekend. I did not watch the NBA All-Star game. I did not see a single positive response from anyone to any. The one thing that was reviewed positively from the weekend was Steph versus Sabrina. That sounded cool. But
except for what they were talking about on the broadcast.
Except the broadcast of that sucked. Like, everything was viewed negatively. You have heard me say this since I started here in 2017. We don't have a need for All-Star games anymore. We have cable. We have League Pass. We have MLB TV. No one cares about the Pro Bowl. No one cares about the NBA All-Star game. The NHL All-Star game is played at like 2 p.m. on a Sunday, right before the Super Bowl. Like, no one cares about these things. They were awesome in 1974. They're not awesome now. Move on. We don't need them anymore. Real quick, you have an ugly.
Yeah, that was my ugly. The game is a disgrace. It's probably...
Your guy, Bob Ryan, nearly had an aneurysm over this weekend.
Probably past the need for it to, like, did you hear Adam Silver in the trophy presentation? He was like, yeah, congratulations to the East for scoring the most points. Not winning.
Wait, that's actually hilarious.
Yeah, he says, congrats for scoring the most points. Then you got Anthony Edwards. Maybe he's the next Michael Jordan. He's a stone cold killer. He's out there talking about, nah, man, we just want a week off, man. Like, it's part of a broader problem that the players don't care about anything that isn't the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a broader problem for the league because the regular season is 82 games long. And if your players don't care, then why do the fans?
No, I agree wholeheartedly. Real quick, you have an ugly.
Yeah, basically the same thing. Also, players just don't care about leagues they are in apparently anymore. Don't care about playing what they seem to have loved and taking the game for granted. I'm talking about Anthony Rendon. Like, what are you doing, Anthony Rendon? That's an ugly towards the league, towards MLB, towards just playing a sport in general and being a professional athlete. What are you doing? Thank God the Nationals didn't make that mistake of re-signing him. That's my ugly.
Anthony Edwards is another one. He said a couple of years ago, he's like, yeah, I wish I had been a wide receiver instead. He's just really good at basketball. My ugly, real quick, the takes. They've gotten bad. Being a professional takesman at this point, it's such a sickness. In the last 2 days, Mike Tannenbaum of ESPN said in back-to-back days, one, the Jets should sign Russell Wilson. That makes no sense. Why would they do that? Today, they said the Chiefs should trade Trent McDuffie for Jalen Waddle. Shannon Sharp went on TV today and said to be the new face of the NBA when LeBron retires, you have to be a married man. You can't be the face of the league if you're not a married man. Stop! Take a breath. Touch grass. We need to stop.
Take brain is real.
It is, and it's poisonous. It is poisonous to all of us. We need to get to a break. Coming up in the 3 o'clock hour, we'll talk some K-State basketball on 580 Sports Talk. o'clock hour of 580 Sports Talk going up on a Tuesday. Brendan Dworzinski, Dan Lucero, Spencer Dupuis, all here with you on this Tuesday afternoon. Thanks so much for hanging out with us after the long holiday weekend. What was hopefully a long holiday weekend for you. Busy 3 o'clock hour coming up. We've got some K-State talk to get to after another rough one last night on the road in Austin against Texas. We'll get to Random Question Tuesday, and Matt Verderame is going to join us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. Didn't get to talk to Matt yesterday, obviously, so he'll join us coming up at the bottom of this hour, about 25 minutes from now. We'd love for you to chime in with your thoughts on anything we're talking about today. Text line number is 785-272-9429, and you can also hit us up on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, search 580 Sports Talk, subscribe to the 580 Sports Talk channel, and you can watch along with the live show today. Comment section is rolling as well. We would love to hear from you and anything you're thinking about what we're talking about today on 580 Sports Talk. K-State has lost 7 of its last 8 games. Of course, the only one in the middle there is a win over KU because, of course.
It gets funnier.
It is, yeah, it is. It is objectively quite funny.
Honestly, it gets funnier the further away you get from it.
Damn, man. I mean, it's just hard to watch. It really is getting to a point where it's just nothing clicks. Like, there's nothing that happens where you just think, like, yes, this is what it's supposed to look like. Like, even, every other team pretty much in the league that's worth a damn. Like, I'm taking Oklahoma State out because they just don't have any dudes. But, like, KU, as much as KU has struggled on the road, or as much as you really only have 5 guys who are playable, when it clicks, you go, oh, yeah, that looks good. That looks crisp. Like, the cuts look good. They get the open looks, ball movement. Houston they're not the cleanest offensive team. They don't shoot the ball especially well, but when it's flowing, it looks good.
And they got a shooter.
Yeah, they've got a shooter, sure.
They got Cryer.
Baylor, same thing. It's taken a while because it's a much different kind of Baylor team, as we've hit on a bunch, but it still looks good when it's looking good. At this point, this is where I would like to start, because I know you've watched a ton of K-State. Spencer, you've watched plenty of K-State at this point. I've watched as much as I possibly can. At this juncture of the season, what is good offense for Kansas State?
That's a great question. I was going to turn that question on you a little bit, like, because we talk about the teams at the top of this league. And when you have to score, what do you do? Like that's the ultimate question for a team, is when you absolutely positively have to get a bucket, what do you do? Like KU, they'll call it, they've got the best X's and O's coach in the league and maybe the country in Bill Self. So they can draw something up that works, but they need a hoop. Throw it in to Hunter Dickinson and throw it inside, get it to the big guy, get a mismatch. Or Kevin McCullough, get down the lane and get fouled.
I know we're going to get to this. K-State's big guys. I can't do it again, man. I can't.
Yeah, let me get there. Let me get there.
Oh,
so,
you don't have that. And as much as you would like Perry to be that, he's just not.
There's a reason that every time it's a late clock situation, because those are all right, we got one play, we got one possession to get a bucket. Late clock, late in a half, late in the game. We got one possession. We have got to score here. And it's not just those scenarios. Those are the ones that stand out the most. But also, like, in the flow of a game, you give up back-to-back buckets. You need to go score to make sure that doesn't become a 6-0 run or a 7-0 run or a 20-2 run, like the one that cost K-State the game on Saturday against TCU, when they played really well for the first 10 minutes of the game and it got away, and then they got back in control, and then they gave up that 20-2 run. And that, more than a bit of a lucky shot from Jameer, why they lost that game. You have to have an answer to that question. How do we score 2 points? How do we make a basket? And for K-State, their solution has been, well, I don't know, Tyler, you do something. And there have been times when that has worked. There have been times where that has been effective. A lot of those times were in the non-conference against much lesser teams than you play in the Big 12, or against a Villanova team that we've come to learn since K-State beat them at Bramlage Coliseum in December is in fact kind of stinky. It has worked in those scenarios. It has not really worked that effectively over the course of the full schedule in the toughest league in college basketball. So that's the biggest problem with this Kansas State offense is they don't have the run stopper play. Like they can't do the thing that any other team in the league can do. Like Cincinnati, you've given up a 6-0 run, you need a hoop, go run Cryer off some screens, give him an open look, or set some ball screens for Jamal Shed and a guy who I think is going to win Conference Player of the Year. You go make a play. There's the difference between Jamal Shed, Conference Player of the Year, go make a play, and Tyler Perry, go make a play. Baylor's got a lottery pick at guard. They got a lottery pick in the post. Throw to one of those two guys. Make them. They'll figure it out. K-State doesn't have that, and they've got a lot of other problems on offense. Like it's just it's cascading problems that they have on offense. We have talked all year about this. They do not have a point guard. They do not have a true one, a guy whose role on the team is to facilitate offense, to look to create for himself or for others. They don't have that natural point guard.
And the thing that's frustrating about that is it's no one's fault.
Right.
Like, they had the guy. He was there. He was even getting ready to come back after getting hurt once and got hurt. Like, the Quez Glover thing just sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks so much.
There are a lot of things that have happened to K-State that are nobody's fault this year. And sometimes it's more frustrating when you don't have anyone to blame.
Yes. 100% agree.
So obviously, no point guard, big problem. The other problem that creates, and there were two possessions last night that stand out for me that really show how much K-State has missed this. So K-State's best shooter is Tyler Perry, even though he's at like 32% on the year from three. Like objectively, he is their best shooter. By the way, do you know what K-State is shooting as a team from three?
28%.
No, they're better than that. They're
all right.
30%.
Great.
Just barely.
Yes.
Sick.
Do you know where that ranks in the Big 12?
Dead last.
DFL. They're not even as good a shooting team as UCF or Cincinnati or West Virginia. K-State is the worst three-point shooting team in the country, which creates its own set of problems, right? Because, okay, we don't have to guard you outside the arc, so we're going to go ahead and pack it in. Well, okay, if you're going to pack it in, that makes the driving lanes disappear. And then when your bigs have the ball, like usually, you bring out a 4 or a 5 to touch the ball on the high post or outside the arc, you can lift the defense a little bit, open up the baseline, open up a driving lane. Nobody respects the K-State bigs as offensive threats, nor should they, because look, I have lots of nice things to say about David Gasson. He's not a great offensive player.
No.
Jarrell Colbert, I don't know that I've seen him make a basket outside of 2 feet. Will McNair, I don't think I've seen make a basket outside 4 feet. They aren't offensive threats. So it wrecks your spacing. When you can't shoot and your bigs can't score, you've got no space. So even if you do have slashers, like Cam Carter, slasher, Arthur Kaluma, slasher, Tyler Perry's even got some wiggle to him, but there's nowhere to go. You're just driving into traffic because your spacing is all wrecked. The one guy who can give you spacing is Perry as a shooter. Problem is, you can't create shots for him when he's the guy who's being asked to create for everyone else. There were 2 possessions. I want to go back to this. 2 possessions from last night where the ball went inside, and I don't remember which big it is. Frankly, as offensive players, all 3 of those guys are basically interchangeable to me. And Tyler Perry had run off a screen, and he was alone on the left wing. There was nobody out there with him. And the pass comes out to the left wing from whichever big it was that had the ball for K-State. And it's a wild pass. And Perry's got to jump kind of awkwardly to catch it. So by the time he gets his feet set and he's ready to shoot, a defender has closed out and the shooting opportunity is gone. Contrast that with a play that happened later. This was all in the second half. There's a play in the second half where K-State missed a shot and Perry was behind the arc, and Gasson makes a great effort play and back taps the offensive rebound, and Perry takes it in the pocket on the right wing. Automatic. Like, put the 3 points on the board before he even goes into his shooting motion. Even if the closeout comes, he caught it in the pocket. He's taking that rhythm 3-pointer. Tyler Perry is a great rhythm 3-point shooter. The problem is they don't get him enough of those looks because they can't, because nobody else is trusted they're trying to trust Day-Day Ames. And I actually thought up until the point he made a terrible foul and got ejected from last night's game, I actually was going to say some nice-ish things about Day-Day because I feel like he's starting to play since he's been in the starting lineup with a little bit more confidence with the ball in his hand. It's not there yet, but he's a freshman, and he's not like a 5-star NBA lottery pick freshman, which means you're going to struggle your first year in the Big 12.
Yes.
Like that's natural, but I feel like he has gotten a little bit more comfortable doing some more things with the ball in his hands. That's a positive, but it's just, again, problem on top of problem on top of problem. Your best shooter doesn't get great looks.
Yep.
Nobody else on the team can shoot. Your bigs can't really score. Your spacing is wrecked. Carter and Kaluma have both been poor offensively the last 2 games. Even if one of them had been average the last 2 times out, they would have beaten TCU.
Yeah.
And they might have beaten Texas if they just get average offense, average efficiency from one of those 2 guys. So, but they can't have anything less than that from those guys. And Tang knows that.
Yeah.
Reed Geddes said it on the broadcast last night that what Tang told him was, hey, if all 3 of those guys play well, we can beat anybody. If only 2 of them play well, maybe we can win.
Honestly,
I will say this as an outsider coming to be somebody that is starting to learn more about the programs and stuff around here. If you are just looking at it from a blueprint of the program right now and just listening, I told you guys this off air earlier. If you're just listening to what Jerome Tang says, that nothing is wrong if you're just listening to what he's saying. 2, he has a different foothold on this program than as an outsider you would think for the way they're playing. 3, if this is what it takes for them to be, I mean, last night he basically said, our guys played well defensively. We really only gave up 55 points. If it wasn't for those final few fouls they had, it's just coming in and hearing. It's kind of weird to hear a coach not be critical of his own team. And it's like it's covering 2 different teams here is covering 2 totally different things here. Covering K-State versus covering Kansas it's really weird.
Well, the expectations are different.
Yeah, but you get Jerome Tang, who's like, it's all good. It's all good. We're playing well, but, not in the best at the times that it counts. And then you're looking at Kansas, who drops a couple games, but even in the games that they win, Coach Self is like, we only have 5 guys. We don't have enough depth. Like, I don't know how we're going to do this.
How
but they're
appalled
still
he was
continuing to do it.
when they beat Baylor, and he's like, this is the worst I've ever felt after a win. Yeah. And Dan's right. Like, the expectation is different there.
Yeah.
And it's a tough line to walk here. And I was telling you this, Spencer, if you're Jerome Tang, because when you go through a tough stretch or you have a bad game with last year's team, you're still feeling good. You're still a tournament team. You've still got guys who on the court are not only going to be your best players, but they are going to make a difference as leaders as well in Keontae and Marquise.
And that team, you want to talk about knowing what you had to do to get a bucket. It wasn't just Marquise go create. It was, we can get Keontae Johnson the ball in the mid post, and he's going to lean in, use his shoulder. He's going to bully his way to the rim, or he's going to knock down that 12-foot fall away. And we're not going to give up those 6-0, 8-0, 10-0 killer runs. We know what we have to do to get a basket. And again, all those problems I laid out, it's so much effort. Everything has to go exactly right for K-State, it feels like, to score. They don't score on accident. They don't, everything has to be, they have to pass the ball into the basket.
And like, I'm looking at those numbers right here for Arthur Kaluma. And you mentioned the last 2 games, which in particular have been really bad. Over the course of this entire month, he's shooting under 40% from the floor. And that's with 2 actually pretty good shooting days against both BYU and Oklahoma State. It's just, if you're not getting star performances out of your best offensive players because of the way things get clogged up, because you lack spacing, because you lack a true facilitator, you're just not going to win. And that's unfortunately the spot that this K-State team is in. And I don't want to I don't want to bash Jerome Tang because I don't think this is all his fault. It's no one's fault that Quest Glover got hurt.
Yes, and it is very much not Jerome Tang's fault that Naquan Tomlin is not with the program. Because you want to talk about a guy who could help your spacing, 6'10", with a little bit of range.
Well, and shoot, I mean, if nothing else, it's at least another guy who can do something on offense. Even if things are clogged up, at least you can give him the ball and say, do something.
Tell you what,
do it.
He can catch a lob.
Yes, he can. Oh, my God. Cam Carter last night. Brother, he threw a lob. I don't even remember who he was going for. Was it Gassan?
I think it was Gassan. Yeah, in transition.
He lobbed it to his hip. That thing was wasn't even close.
That's another thing about this K-State team in contrast to last year. This goes back to you don't really have a great point guard. They're not good in transition. I can't believe how many times I've watched them play this year and they get a turnover, and instead of turning that into points the other way, it turns into either not points or it turns into 5-on-5. Like, they're not a good running team. Last year, that was a big thing because they weren't always a great half-court offense team last year. In fact, there were stretches where they weren't a good half-court offense team at all. But the thing they could do is they get out and run. And this year's team, they don't have the ability to get out and run and finish in the same way. Their bigs aren't as good finishing. They don't have a Tomlin who's an excellent rim runner in those scenarios. Gasson is not that level. Like, I think he's got some strengths, but if he's got a dozen points and you need those to be in a game, that's a problem.
Yeah, the team I would compare this K-State group to, and I know it's not apples to apples. A lot of people this year have compared this year's KU team to the 2018-2019 team that lost to Auburn in the NCAA tournament, where it's just, like, they're good, got good players. The next year, the team was the best team in the country with many of the same guys, but it just, everything was off. Like, it just, the offense never flowed. You had one guy you relied on. Now, it was a big man for that KU team. It was Dedrick Lawson. For this K-State team, it kind of has to be Perry just because he has the ball 80% of the time. This year's K-State team, different level of talent and different expectations. Reminds me so much of the 21 KU team, the year between the COVID season and the national championship team, where you remember who had to play the point the majority of that year?
Marcus Garrett.
And you know, I love Marcus Garrett.
National Defensive Player of the Year, Marcus Garrett.
National Defense Player of the Year, but he wasn't a true point guard.
No.
He was not. And Juwan Harris wasn't ready yet because he had redshirted the year before. He didn't play a whole lot. Jalen Wilson didn't come into his own. Ochai Agbaji has always had the bounce. He's always had the ceiling offensively. You know what Ochai could not do until he was a senior?
Shoot.
No, he couldn't pass.
Oh, pass.
I've never seen a worse passer from the perimeter than Ochai until his senior. He threw the ball away so often, it was unbelievable. Christian Brown had all the promise of his freshman year, how good he was as a junior. He was not very good as a sophomore relative to expectations. That was all those like Bryce Thompson, Tristan Enaruna, just a bunch of guys. It's like, what are you doing well? That's what I see when I see Will McNair right now. Like, the idea of Will McNair, this big ogre in the post who's just going to out-muscle you, that's great until he, like, doesn't know how to dribble. I was not very nice about him on Twitter last night because he just total terrible foul in the post. He shoves the dude in the back on the rebound. Next possession down after I tweet mean things, he scored after he took about 6 steps to walk to the basket and didn't get called.
And then the defensive possession after that, he hits the 3-point shooter with a shoulder charge.
Steamrolled him. Like, it's just so many guys you have to ask, like, what are you providing right now? And what are you adding to the table?
Yes. What are you bringing to the table?
That's a good way to put it. And the positive spin here, and it's more silver lining than anything, Ames is a freshman. RJ is a freshman.
That's the guy they got to play more.
Yes, I agree.
To see if he can help with the spacing and shoot the dang ball. Because, I mean, you can't shoot 30% from 3 and win games in college basketball.
No.
You have to be, and K-State is legitimately an excellent defensive team. They went up 7 spots in the Ken Palm adjusted defense rankings last night.
Yeah.
They are 16th in the country defensively. That's like 4th or 5th best in the best league in the country. They are a top 20 defensive team. Their defensive effort last night was good enough to win. The way they defended Texas was good enough to win that basketball game. The problems are all on offense, and I don't think it's scheme. I don't put this on Jerome Tang. I don't put this on him. You don't have the players. You don't have the pieces that you need. And that part is, a little bit on Jerome Tang. But again, is it his fault Quest Glover got hurt? Is it his fault Naquan Tomlin wasn't allowed to return to the team? Is it his fault that freshman? Look, sometimes this happens in year 2. What would year 2 look like for Chris Kleiman? I know football and basketball aren't the same, but year 2 for Chris Kleiman, K-State went 4-6. Didn't make a bowl. And I know the COVID year was weird and really shouldn't even be considered as a real season. But still, that's what year 2 looked like for Chris Kleiman. And look where he's at now. So I am not concerned watching K-State that, oh boy, I don't know, maybe Jerome Tang was a 1-year wonder. Like, I don't think that at all. I'm not even close to thinking that. But obviously, they've got to get a real point guard into the program, and they've got to get some bigs who can either score or pass. That's the one thing. Fran Fraschilla was on top of this. He tweeted about this a couple weeks ago. Preparing to do a K-State game. He says, basically, I'm paraphrasing, their bigs can't pass. Like, so much of the K-State offense is the big reversing the ball, setting a screen, keeping the line moving, so to speak, and also, hitting cutters.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have, Will McNair can't do that. Jarrell Colbert can't do that. And there's some development left for a lot of these guys. There's development left even for a guy like Cam Carter. There's development for Colbert. There's development for Ames and Jones and Buddy Rich, who I think athletically is still a really intriguing prospect. But it doesn't fit together. They've got a bunch of instrumentalists and no conductor. And we could see this coming kind of in December. And you hoped maybe they could piece it together, shoot well enough, and that hasn't happened. And when you are not good enough, even if you're just not good enough, this league destroys you.
Yep.
This league chews you up and it spits you out.
Our guy, Ryan Gilbert, who works for Fitz over at Go PowerCat, we've had Ryan on the show before to talk K-State. He's the K-State specific writer for the guys at Go PowerCat. He does a really good job, and he tweeted some blind optimism, I would call last night. Said, hey, look, this team won 4 of 5 to start the Big 12 season. If they can do it again, who knows? And I appreciate the optimism, but we have seen, this feels like a worse outcome than the norm, or than what, if you were to give me a million different outcomes for this K-State team, this is farther to the worst end than it is to the middle, I think. But I do think the median is closer to this than it was to the start of Big 12 play for K-State. There's just not, and again, it is no one's fault. It is the fault of the injury gods, which is unfortunate, and you hate to deal with that. And whatever the hell happened with Richard Linton and Naquan Tomlin, and we don't need to get into that anymore. It's unfortunate, but that just is what it is. And in a league that is this good and this physical and this tough night in and night out, you can't survive like that. By the way, this isn't the be-all, end-all, but it feels kind of like the end-all, at least. Right now at the bracket matrix, there are 98 different bracketologists who have entries in.
Mm-hmm.
K-State is listed in the tournament on precisely 0 of them.
Well, I mean, that's reasonable. They do. They have their margin for error is gone because they're not going to Allen Fieldhouse and winning. They have to win the rest of their Big 12 games. And that means protect home court and win at Cincinnati. And that in and of itself doesn't sound that daunting. Home teams have been drastically better in the Big 12 this season. And Cincinnati is, you would consider, a gettable road game for just about anybody in the league. It's not impossible. I will not shovel the final handful of dirt onto the tournament hopes for Kansas State just yet, but margin for error is gone.
BYU at home this Saturday.
That's a winnable game.
That's a winnable game. West Virginia at home next Monday.
Winnable game.
Cincinnati on the road, March 2nd.
Winnable game.
Allen Fieldhouse.
Next. Iowa State Senior Day. Yeah, I think I was wrong about Iowa State. They're actually good. I don't know how.
Yeah.
I don't know how. But
listen, I know that no one wants to just no one wants to hear about your fantasy football team. I think most people have accepted we don't want to hear about your bets beyond a very quick note about them. Man, I was sweating last night when Houston and Iowa State just kept shooting free throws back and forth.
Yeah, the under?
The line was 8.5.
Oh, yeah, the line.
And okay. I had Iowa State, and every time I was like, oh, God, stop fouling. Just let them go. Let them score. Oh, man, that had me freaking out. Did you have the under?
No.
Did it go over?
It went over.
I'm glad you didn't have the under.
The line jumped 5 points. It still went over.
Wow. We're going to get to Random Question Tuesday next. Then we'll talk to Matt Verderame coming up here on 580 Sports Talk. Time for a really quick round of Random Question Tuesday before we get to Matt Verderame. Dan, what you got for us?
What is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
This is hard because I have two.
So you have two then. That's fine.
What are your two?
Cookies and cream and chocolate chip cookie dough.
Good answers, both.
Yeah, both good. Abby
Yeah.
just bought cookies and cream for us the other day.
We have cookies and cream in our freezer right now.
How about that?
That's it was funny because that we were talking about somehow ice cream came out. We were talking about Andy Reid and how he loves Haagen-Dazs. We were talking about that on Valentine's Day. I got home and I had gotten my wife some flowers and some candy, and my wife had gotten me, some candy and a card. Say, hey, there's another surprise in the freezer. And I go, look, and it's Bluebell cookies and cream, my favorite kind of ice cream.
There we go.
And I'm like, did you hear us talking about that on the show? She said, no. Why were you talking about ice cream? So I manifested it.
That's pretty funny.
We've been chowing down on the ice cream. Yeah, cookies and cream, man. Good choice.
Yeah, cookies and cream is good. I love a good mint chocolate chip. Chocolate peanut butter is probably my number one, though. I love a good chocolate peanut butter. There's one, just the Kroger brand, the Dillon's brand, though. That's just like chocolate cookie crumble. Shockingly good for store brand ice cream.
Do you have a preferred ice cream manufacturer? You say you were a Ben and Jerry's guy, right? Spencer?
I like Ben and Jerry's, but I mean,
ice cream
sometimes
is ice cream.
Dan, it's not always in the budget,
No, brother, ain't that true? The only time we will get the Ben and Jerry's at home is when there is a coupon.
Yeah, well, I would always get it when it was like buy one get the second, like
right.
It's like the $3 off total.
Yeah, when it's on sale, oh yeah, definitely.
You ever get the gelato, the Talenti, the gelato?
I think Abby's gotten that.
I've seen that before. I've never gotten it.
It's little pricey, but my parents like the salted caramel, and I was like, "What is this? This is gonna be whack." Nah, man, it's pretty good.
As good as advertised. Matt Verderame is going to join us next from Sports Illustrated here on 580 Sports Talk. Joining us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline here on 580 Sports Talk is the one and only Matt Verderame. He covers all things NFL for Sports Illustrated and SI.com. He is also the host of the Matt Verderame Show on Patreon. You can find him on Twitter at Matt Verderame. Matt, how has a week post-Super Bowl been for you?
It's been nice. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's been nice. It's been kind of good to just unwind a little bit. But it's also one of those deals where you know the calendar of the NFL if you've done this long enough now, and you know, like, yeah, it's going to be the franchise tag window, which it now is today, and then next week it's in Indianapolis. So glad to have the week off, but now revved up and ready to go until the end of the NFL draft.
As we gear up for the combine, for the start of the league year, quote unquote legal tampering and the draft and all of that, as we look ahead, Matt, to this offseason, what is maybe the one biggest league-wide narrative that you are interested in? Is it the veteran quarterbacks and where they end up? Is it simply what are the Chiefs going to do to get even better? What would you say is kind of the league-wide narrative that you're most excited to follow this offseason?
You know, really not to pander to the local crowd here, but it's got to be the Chiefs. I mean, they're going for a three-peat, which has never been done in the Super Bowl era. Now, the Packers have done it twice. They did it 29-31 and 65-67, with two of those being Super Bowl wins. But it's never been done in the Super Bowl era. And so you're talking about something that's essentially unprecedented. It's only even come close to being done once, really. Maybe you want to say twice in the salary cap era with the Cowboys and the Pats. But I think it's a question of two-pronged. One is, what do the Chiefs do? Because they've got a lot of questions here on how they're going to handle everything. And two, how are these teams in the AFC specifically? How are they going to get better to catch the Chiefs? And it's a real question because the Bills are way over the cap. The Dolphins are way over the cap. The Chargers are way over the cap. So it's not like it's going to be really easy. The Ravens have a ton of free agents. I'm very curious to see how the rest of the conference tries to make a run at Kansas City.
Who do you feel, based on, I mean, there's so many different factors that go into this, and I guess we should probably stick with the AFC, but who do you think is the most primed, is in the best position to make a run to be a contender next to the Chiefs? Because I'm of the belief, and I said this last week on the show, Matt, we need to stop with so-and-so is better than them. No, they're not. The Chiefs had a down year and won the Super Bowl. So let's make sure that they're always in that top echelon. But who in the conference do you believe, given who they already have, the coaches in place, what they could do this offseason, are best in line to be at that same level and to be able to contend for a conference title with the Chiefs?
Yeah. No, first of all, I agree. The Chiefs are the best team. Anybody who wants to argue with that can argue with a wall. At this point, it just is what it is. I would say that if Burrow's healthy, I still think the Bengals are the biggest threat to the Chiefs. They know how to play him. They're not afraid of him. Now, look, obviously that also hinges on Higgins coming back, probably on a tag. If he doesn't come back, I still think they're dangerous, but then it changes the way you play them because Boyd's not going to be back, and I don't think Mixon's going to be back. I think he'll be a cap casualty. So the Bengals are still there. The Bills, as long as they have Allen, are a threat. The problem with the Bills is that they're going to lose quite a few pieces this year, and they haven't been able to beat the Chiefs before that. So what all of a sudden makes that change? I don't know. I'll give you the one team, though. They got the quarterback, and they got a lot of cap space, and it's Houston. Houston is a very intriguing team. Now, I would probably say I think they're more of a 2025 contender than a 2024 one in terms of actually beating out Kansas City, getting to the Super Bowl. But Stroud is legit. They got a lot of young talent. I believe in the coach. That's a team that if Chris Jones hits the market, I'm going all in on Chris Jones. If I'm the Texans, who cares? I try to get him and Mike Evans. You have the money to do it. You have the quarterback on a rookie deal. So I think Houston's really interesting, but I still think Cincinnati, Buffalo, to some extent Baltimore, although I think the stars kind of align for them. I think those teams are all going to still be there.
Our guest is Matt Verderame, covers the National Football League for Sports Illustrated, SI.com, and also on his Patreon, Matt Verderame Show. Be sure to check that out. Find him on Twitter at Matt Verderame. You can catch him joining us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline, usually on Mondays at this time on 580 Sports Talk. Gracious enough to join us on this Tuesday after the holiday weekend. Matt, let's shift over to the NFC real quick. Obviously, the 49ers, the reigning champs, and they continue to do something right. They've got obviously Brock Purdy pretty cheap for the next couple of years and can continue to try and assemble the roster around him. What teams are the most intriguing to you in that conference as far as going into this offseason, either needing to do some major retooling or maybe being on the cusp of becoming a serious contender?
I look at the NFC North, honestly. Like, to me, I know people are going to talk about Dallas, and I'll throw my hand up and say I was one of the dopes last offseason and said, hey, watch out for the Cowboys, and then just immediately regretted it like 4 games into the year because you could see the obvious issues that were going to cost them. I'm out on Dallas at this point. Unless Dallas does something unbelievably drastic, I'm done. I think Philadelphia, like, you don't collapse the way they did down the stretch without having some real issues. So I look at the North, and I look at the Lions, and I look at the Packers. To me, those are 2 really interesting teams. The Lions, look, that's obvious, right? I mean, they had a great draft class, and they went to the NFC title game. If they don't fall apart in the second half of that game, they're probably in the Super Bowl. The Packers, to the chagrin of everybody else in that division, have what looks to be another franchise quarterback. I love the coach. LaFleur's a great coach. Like, they have some holes they want to shore up. Like, defensively, I think they're going to be better just by the fact that Joe Barry's no longer the coordinator there. But they still could add, shore up the offensive line, things like that. But I think the Packers and Lions are going to be very tough next year. I think the Vikings, if they bring back Cousins, like, they're not probably winning the Super Bowl. They're probably a playoff team. They're probably somewhat threatening. So I think the NFC North is probably, along with the Rams, I throw them in there as well. To me, those are the teams that will threaten the most with San Francisco.
So if there are 4 possible outcomes for the Chiefs, let's double back to Kansas City, the defending champs. If there are 4 possible outcomes for the Chiefs regarding their 2 defensive stars who are set to hit free agency, Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed, the outcomes are they only keep Jones, they only keep Sneed, they keep them both, or they don't keep either of them. Which of those 4 outcomes seems the likeliest to you?
I have gone back and forth on this 1,000 times, whether it's because you get different information from people around the situation in the league as the years played out, or just gut feel, just strictly looking at it, knowing how the Chiefs operate. I would say the most likely outcome, well, let's put it this way. I think the most unlikely outcome is that they're both gone. I don't see any scenario that happens. Even if they tag one of them, I think it is considerably more likely that they're both back than that they're both gone. But if you said the most likely of the other scenarios, I would say that Jones back and Sneed not would be my answer. And I've gone back and forth on that a few times because, frankly, Sneed has been spectacular. He's younger. I don't care. Even if he's top of the cornerback market, he's still cheaper. I talked to some people in the league, some agents in the league, and said, look, give me a projection. Give me a projection on what his contract would be. And the general thought was about 3 years and $45 million, which I think for the Chiefs, I think that's low, quite honestly. But that was the general consensus. So take that for what it's worth. If you're the Chiefs and you can get Sneed at 3 and 45, I think you'd do it yesterday. Jones, the consensus was much higher, 4 and 110. So if you're the Chiefs, you've got to weigh that. The reason I say Jones, though, even though the expenses are there, I just don't think they can replace him. As great as Sneed is, if they trot out McDuffie, Watson, Williams, throw another corner in the mix, maybe Connor plays in the slot some. Like, I still think that secondary is really, really good. It's not what it was, but it's still really good. There's no replacing Chris Jones. It just doesn't happen. So I would say that he's more likely, but I'll also add this quickly. If they sign Jones before this tag window's done, I think they'll just tag Sneed. Because at that point, the Chiefs have the money. They can just restructure Mahomes and save $35 million. So I think if they get Jones done here in the next 10 days or so, if that can happen, then I think there's a very real possibility to keep the ball.
Matt Verderame, our guest here of Sports Illustrated on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. And Matt, it's being reported around the league that the salary cap number, at least by one person, is being reported that it could go up to $250 million. But most reports are suggesting around $242 million. Obviously, $8 million is is a good bit of money. It could be the difference between signing one player or not on a team. Where do you see the salary cap figure lying?
Yeah, look, it was always going to jump quite a bit this year. I mean, just all the TV money, the streaming money, the gambling money, and the NFL at this point has more revenue streams than the United States government. Like I think it's probably going to end up right around 245, which is a big jump. I mean, you're talking almost $30 million. So, if you're some of these teams that either have a lot of free agents like the Chiefs and the Ravens, or if you're a team that is just simply trying to get cap compliant like the Bills and the Dolphins, you are obviously hoping that number just keeps going up and up and up. Now, look, I was told, I remember years ago being at the Combine at the beginning of the decade and being told by the end of the decade, the salary cap is going to be about $400 million. Now, COVID put a crimp into that to some extent. I do not think that the end of the decade is going to see 400. I bet it sees 350 to 375. And so if you're a team, you're trying to figure this out, you're going to structure contracts a lot the way Kansas City does, where you give a smaller number up front and you back end these contracts. I think that's what you're going to see. That being said, if the salary cap does come in around 245, that's sizable. I think most teams in the league went into the offseason operating under the idea, hey, let's plan for about 240. And if it's more than that, great. It clearly appears it's going to be more than 240. And I know, to some, hey, 3 million, 5 million, what is it? That's a lot in the NFL. That is a whole draft class that's now accounted for. So that would be a little bit of a welcome surprise for some of these teams trying to figure out their cap maneuver.
Matt, I know this can be a little difficult putting you on the spot with, there's 1,700 players in the NFL, but are there any names that stand out to you as potential or maybe even likely cap casualties as we're now less than 3 weeks away from what is effectively the start of free agency?
Yeah, no, there are. I look at a guy like Nick Chubb in Cleveland, who is a great player, but unfortunately, coming off of a very serious knee injury, into his late 20s, I think there's a real chance Cleveland moves on. I think there's a very real chance Cleveland moves on, and you get a team that takes a shot on him on a short-term deal. I think you look at the Chargers. The Chargers might be the poster children for it at this point. I mean, look, Allen, Bosa, Williams, and Mack all have cap hits over $32 million this year.
Wow.
And other than Bosa, they're all going to be free agents at the end of the season. Bosa's the only one who's not. I think Mike Williams is gone. I think Khalil Mack gets traded, but he could also be cut, which would be wild considering he had 17 sacks this past season. But I think that's where the Chargers are at. Their books are a mess. They've got to start to figure out, rejigger the whole situation. Denver, you look at Denver and you say, okay, Justin Simmons, is he gone? Garrett Bowles, is he gone? I think Bowles is gone. Simmons, maybe they try to do a short-term extension or restructure if they don't just outright cut him. But there are going to be a lot of guys. Kansas City MVS, I'd be shocked if he's not a cap casualty. There are going to be the Bills, by the way, have a number of them. Poyer, I believe, will be gone. Tre'Davious White might be gone. I don't think they would cut Mitch Morse. He's too important. I think they probably try to restructure. But, oh, yeah, you look around the league, there are going to be a lot of guys who are hitting the market here in the next couple of weeks. We already saw Whitehair and Jackson in Chicago. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There'll be a lot of name free agents out there soon enough.
What does the market look like for some of the veteran quarterbacks who are going to be available and out there? And I guess veteran has a pretty wide definition here in this question, but Kirk Cousins might be out there. The Vikings might bring him back. Like you said, he also might be able to go out there and truly test the market. He's coming off a torn Achilles, which is probably going to hurt his value, but Pittsburgh all of a sudden is a much better team with a guy like Cousins instead of a guy like Pickett. Atlanta, I think, is interesting. Russell Wilson, I think we all agree that he's not long for Denver at this point. Where does he end up? Justin Fields, I think he stinks, but, he's a great athlete. Maybe someone thinks, hey, I can fix that guy. What does the market look like right now for some of these veteran quarterbacks who will likely have new homes?
Yeah, I think when you hit on a lot of them, Garoppolo getting suspended, I think he's as good as gone with the Raiders. I don't think he's getting a starting job. I think at this point, he'll be a backup somewhere. Russell Wilson's fascinating. Assuming Denver releases him, they're going to eat an $85 million dead cap charge, which at some point there should be a 30 for 30 done on that whole situation. But in the meantime, when he hits the market, I've had a lot of people telling me, look, he's going to garner a lot of interest because he's going to be making the veteran minimum next year. Like his language in his contract stipulates Denver's got to pay all that money. So he's going to go somewhere and be getting paid nothing. That makes him very intriguing. If you're a Steelers team, that, as you mentioned, could upgrade. If you're the Falcons, those are, if Cousins leaves, would Wilson go to Minnesota? I'll give you one that nobody's really talked about with Wilson is the Raiders. He was very interested years ago in going to the Raiders when he was getting out of Seattle. And if the Raiders move on from Garoppolo and they don't love this draft class with Bo Nix, Penix, and guys like that, they might just say, hey, we'll take Russell Wilson for a year or two at the veterans minimum. We're fine with that as we kind of get this program off the ground. So I look at that. I look at Tannehill. Tannehill played under Arthur Smith for years in Tennessee. Where's Arthur Smith right now? He's the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I mean, that, again, he's not great. He's Joe Montana compared to Kenny Pickett. So you look at that situation. I think, and then Fields is the one that's fascinating. He is not making a lot of money. He's probably going to cost a second-round pick or so. What team makes the move? I mean, we've just talked about a lot of the candidates. I'm with, like, I think he's a project, but he's also the kind of guy who's a hell of a lot more upside with him versus a guy like Tannehill. So I think Cousins and Mayfield stay where they are. You never know. I think Mayfield, I'd be shocked if he's out of Tampa. But I think, look, those teams, those are playoff teams with those guys. I don't think they're just going to let them get out of the building.
Matt Verderame covers the entire National Football League for Sports Illustrated and SI.com. That's where you can find his work. You can also check him out on the brand new Matt Verderame Show, which you can subscribe to on his Patreon. He joins us usually on Mondays, this week on Tuesday here on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. Matt, we appreciate it. Enjoy the Combine next week, and we'll talk to you then.
Sounds good. Take care, guys.
That is Matt Verderame from Sports Illustrated. Low-key, Matt is unbelievably funny.
Yeah.
Quick-witted roast is just such a skill of his. It really is impressive. Coming up in the 4 o'clock hour, we're talking baseball. Spring training is finally here. We've got What Is Wrong With You and more coming up right here on 580 Sports Talk. now 4 o'clock hour of 580 Sports Talk going up on a Tuesday. I'm Brendan Dworzynski. He's Dan Lucero. He is Spencer Dupuis. We are here with you until about 5:30 today, 5:30-ish today for 580 Sports Talk. We're off early for Lewis Toyota Tuesday Night Hoops, our final regular season edition of Tuesday Night Hoops, in fact. And we've got a good one on tap.
Yes, we've got United Kansas Conference basketball tonight. Seaman and Shawnee Heights, 3 of the 4 teams that take the floor tonight, are ranked in the top 10 of Class 5A. The girls matchup, number 2 Seaman, number 7 Shawnee Heights. The Shawnee Heights boys, I think, are up to number 6 in the 5A top 10, 15-1 in their last 16. So we're going to have some great teams, some great individual performers, and a great rivalry always. Seaman and Shawnee Heights. Since Heights caught their heater, they were 0-2, the boys, and then they've won 15 of their last 16 since then. The closest game they've played, other than their loss in that stretch, was a 3-point win over Seaman. So,
wow.
Should be a tight one in both games. We expect both to be competitive tonight. Myself and Larry Latimer on the call from Tecumseh. We hope you'll stick with us tonight here on 580 WIBW.
Coming up in just a few moments, we will hear from Michael Swain. That's more than a few moments. That's coming up at the bottom of this hour. Some breaking KU news, in fact. New offensive line coach Scott Fuchs left for the NFL just the other day, late last week. That was a bummer, but someone well-known to Lance Leipold is going to take the job. So we'll talk about that coming up with Michael Swain, plus plenty of KU hoops action. We've got What Is Wrong With You, and we'll talk some Royals baseball. Your texts as well are welcome, 785-272-9429. Send them on in, and you can find us as well on YouTube. 580 Sports Talk is the name of our YouTube channel. Just search 580 Sports Talk on YouTube. That is the easiest way to go and find us. Spring training is underway down in Surprise, Arizona. They are pitchers and catchers reported last week. Full squad is there now. We've got our first spring training game for the Royals coming up on Friday this week. This is exciting. This is the most excited I've been for baseball season in a while. And it has nothing to do with my favorite team because, unfortunately, billionaire Tom Ricketts is poor again. Oh, I'm so sad. Oh, how sorry. He needs more revenue.
God knows that has nothing to do with my favorite team, who lost 100 games for the first time ever last year. And Spencer, I'm guessing your excitement, whatever level it is, has nothing to do with your favorite team, which is also Stinky Butt.
Yes, and they just announced they are not going to sell their team, which makes me really mad.
Yeah, I saw that.
So the whole reason they traded Juan Soto in the first place and didn't extend him is, well, we're going through the process of a sale. It'd be too hard for us to do a long-term deal with Juan Soto. And now they're not selling. That's great. That's awesome.
But I think it all has to do with their stupid media rights deal, TV rights deal with Masson.
Yeah, what a
baseball economics are in great shape.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I think
very healthy sport.
I don't think the Orioles sale might not be able to pass unless, I think there's some uprooting people wanting to split the media rights, and that the NFL owner MLB owner might not approve it.
Things are going great.
Yeah.
Things are going great for the health of Major League Baseball as a whole. But I'm excited about the season. I'm excited about this Royals season.
They intrigue me in a legitimate way.
Yes.
The Royals are officially intriguing. Do not get that confused necessarily with good or legitimate contenders, but they are intriguing with a chance to maybe be one of those things. And after 6 straight years of being lousy, I think you take that.
Ken Rosenthal, the foremost or among the foremost reporters in all of baseball and the premier national baseball writer at The Athletic, wrote a whole column about the Royals this week. There are major free agents who haven't signed. The Yankees are going to be good. The Dodgers are going to be good. All these big name, big brand teams are going to be good. He wrote a whole column about the Royals titled "Royals New Additions Offer a Singular Vision. Contend in the AL Central." We have talked about this. And this column, the link to it, got clowned on Twitter this weekend. Oh, wow, contend for what, 73 wins? Well, I think most Royals fans would be thrilled to get to 73 wins this year. That would be a 17-win improvement.
Yeah, improve by 17 wins. Yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be a huge step up. But again, this year has been depressing around a lot of Major League Baseball with, again, the way the teams just aren't willing to spend.
There's a Cy Young Award winner still a free agent. There's a former MVP still sitting out there in free agency.
By the way, let's make note. This isn't like a 2013 Cy Young Award winner who's just trying to cling on. No, the guy who literally won the award and had it announced like 3 months ago.
Yeah, last year's Cy Young Award winner.
It's outrageous that these are still issues. But the Royals have been among the top 5 teams in all of baseball in how much they've spent this year. They are trying. And the rest of the division, we have been over this. The Twins, what have they done to get better?
I don't know that they've done anything to get better. Lost their best starting pitcher.
What have the Guardians done to get better?
Nothing. They're trying to trade their most experienced starting pitcher and their closer.
That pitcher who also, by the way, once won a Cy Young Award.
Yeah.
What have the Tigers done?
Now, they did go out and pay, oh gosh, who did they, starting pitcher. They did go out and get a starting pitcher. Maybe even 2 of them. And I'm blanking. They went to Maeda. They went and signed Maeda, which
who's had moments.
Yeah, like a solid guy.
Yeah.
Wilmer Flores. They went and, oh no, that's the wrong Wilmer Flores. My apologies.
Yes, the other Wilmer Flores.
Yeah, there are multiple Wilmer Flores. That should be illegal.
But they also signed Shelby Miller.
Passable as a reliever last year for the Dodgers. But
Jack Flaherty?
Yeah,
they've added
did.
some pieces.
Okay, yeah, that I knew they had added another starting pitcher. So yeah, they went out and got Jack Flaherty, who it was good once. I mean,
yeah,
like probably not getting much more out of him than like number 4 starter. So like, how much do the Tigers really improve? The Tigers are kind of like the Royals, where they're hoping their young guys really improve, but they have certainly done yet less to bring players in from outside that should expect to make their team better than the Royals have.
And they were in such a hole before. Like I think the Tigers have a deeper hole to dig out of than the Royals do. I don't remember exactly what the Tigers' final record was last year. It was better than the Royals.
They also signed Mark Canha, who I've always liked.
Okay, that's
the
decent.
Tigers were a 78 win team last year. Pythag had them for 73. So 5 wins. They were 5 wins lucky, I guess you could say, where the Royals won 56 last year. Pythag had them for 64. They were 8 wins unlucky,
right?
If you'd rather.
And then the last one is the White Sox, who
unserious baseball
are
team.
actively trying to sabotage their franchise, any goodwill they have with the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois, all of their fans.
They're like 3 or 4 teams that are like honestly doing a Rachel Phelps in Major League right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the White Sox are one of them.
Yes, the White Sox and the A's, both. Like that. That's your company if you're the Chicago White Sox. The A's. That it's embarrassing. So that's your division. It's an awful division.
Yeah.
Awful division.
You couldn't do this in any other division. You could not be a 56-win team signing a couple of mid-rotation starting pitchers and a couple of everyday players, neither of whom are spectacular, and retool your bullpen and say, no, we actually feel like we can maybe hang around in the division. Like the other team, like Oakland couldn't do that in the West. Colorado couldn't do that in the National League West. The Nationals couldn't do that in the National League East. Boston doesn't want to in the American League
no
East.
Desire to.
Absolutely no desire to spend any money. Like maybe St. Louis, because their 71 win year last year was such an aberration that maybe they could have spent their way back in. And I know they've tried to upgrade. They added Sonny Gray, who was Minnesota's best starter last year, so they can improve. But yeah, it's funny. You know, the Central Division, you would think the Chicago teams would be the financial muscle in those divisions, but neither Chicago team has the will or desire to overpower their divisional mates with pure spending power in a way that like the Mets have tried to do in the East or the Dodgers have tried to do in the National League West. So
one is crying poor and the other, in true Chicago fashion, is a Ponzi scheme.
You know, a team that spent a little bit of money this offseason and you wouldn't have expected it just because their owner sucks too?
Who's that?
The Pirates. They spent a little bit of money this offseason.
The crappy team.
And they should. They
and
won,
the Dodgers.
They won 76 games last year. So they can feel like, hey, you know, Milwaukee is obviously going backwards. They moved Corbin Burns, who won the Cy Young 2 years ago. So, like, if they're going backwards, why can't we go forwards and maybe be in the mix in the National League Central?
Yeah.
So, geographically speaking, it has benefited the Royals to be in the division they're in, because in no other division could we look at what they have on hand and what they've added this offseason and say, yeah, they can maybe punch closer to the middle, maybe even the top of their division. But they can do it in the Central where no one else is trying. No one else has the financial weight or wherewithal to want to go out. Like, there's no danger that one of these teams is going to go sign Blake Snell and Cody Bellinger tomorrow, and then all of a sudden you've got a clear-cut Central Division favorite. You don't have that.
Yeah, but wouldn't that be sick?
If we're the Royals.
If the Royals just went out and signed Cody Bellinger.
We would do 4 hours, nothing but Royals.
Yes, that is 100% correct.
If they went out and added a Cy Young Award winner. Hey, listen, man, like, he wants to work.
Yeah.
John Sherman, you got the money, baby.
He's not going to make your team look bad. He's going to pitch for 5 innings, and he's going to go home and play Call of Duty. Like, that's what he's going to do for you.
The most singularly unpleasant to watch great pitcher in baseball, Blake Snell.
No, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Craig Brown over at Into the Fountains. We've had Craig on the show many, many times. Did his roster projection 2.0 just late last week. And is it a great roster? No. Is it going to win the World Series? Is it going to win the division? Honestly, probably not. But is it going to be interesting? Is it going to be watchable? Is it enough where you could talk yourself into, they could mess around, get hot, and at least be in the running into September to hang around in the division? Sure. The rotation is the strength of the team? Is a strength of the team? Like, your top 4 of Reagans, Waka, Lugo, Singer, I mean, that's more than serviceable.
We just have to get a version of Brady Singer that's somewhere between what he looked like in the second half of 22 and what he was last year, which I think that's probably what you're going to get from Singer. And if that's what he is, then yeah, if he's your number 4 starter, I feel pretty good about that. You always need more than 5 guys. The problem with the Royals last year is they didn't really have anybody, with Singer struggling, they did not have the one guy who you felt like, okay, we're sending this guy out here, we're going to win today. They didn't have that guy until Reagan started dealing in August and September. So this year, though, you've got some steady veterans who they're not going to give you like 200 innings, but for the 25 to 30 starts that Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo make, you think you can win your share of those. You feel good about having those guys on the mound. Reagan's looked like the best left-hander in the American League last year for the final 2 months. If he can be something approximating that, that's a bona fide top of the rotation arm. And then if Singer settles in as a mid-rotation guy, a 3 or a 4 caliber starting pitcher, then that's fine. And then you don't need Jordan Lyles to be a guy who starts 35 games. Maybe he's your swingman. Maybe he starts 15 games and pitches some in relief.
Yeah.
And maybe Daniel Lynch, who apparently pitched well in the winter leagues, makes a step forward and fulfills some of his promise.
I've been a Lynch believer for a long time.
I was too.
I have unfortunately divested myself of all Daniel Lynch stock.
I am still holding.
He is more myth than man to me at this point.
I am still holding. He's got the starter pitch mix.
He does.
I'm not ready to. He's got to find the velocity. Like if the velocity doesn't bounce back, then I'm just out. I'm just cleaned out of my Daniel Lynch stock.
But you can live with that's a starting rotation that you don't just live with. Like, you can win plenty of games with those guys as your top 4.
It's not better than Cleveland's, and it's not better than Detroit's. And maybe you don't have a guy in it as good as Dylan Cease in Chicago, who is still a White Sox for, well, what time is it now? He's still a White Sox for a little bit longer. But the depth of it, I think, holds up pretty well in comparison to those other staffs. Because with Cleveland, it's a lot of youth, and they might trade Bieber. And with Detroit, it's a lot of youth. Like, Tarek Skubal was great second half of last year. Speaking of left-handers coming back from injury, can he do that for a full season? It's the same question that you have for Reagan.
I got one thing before you hit the break. Not about any of this. I just wanted to see if you guys saw this yesterday. Bryce Harper, who has 7 years left on his deal, says he wants an extension already. He wants to play well into his 40s, and he wants to die in a Phillies uniform. It's a little bit ridiculous, right?
I think that's a little morbid, honestly.
Yeah.
Getting back to the Royals.
Sorry.
The rotation, I do think, is the strength of the team. They've done quite a bit to build out the bullpen. I think they've added Will Smith, Chris Stratton. They traded for John Schreiber over the weekend, who's had back-to-back pretty solid years with Boston. So they've got a little bit more certainty there. Guys who've done it in the major leagues, so you don't have all the question marks that you did last year. You had no idea if the guy you brought in from the bullpen, if his name wasn't Aroldis Chapman, like what was he going to get?
Right.
So a little bit more certainty on the back end there. The thing that to me will be the thing that separates them from either, hey, it was nice that they tried to be good, but they're still going to slog their way to about 70 wins, to, hey, maybe come August, they can be within shouting distance of the division lead or a wild card spot. It's going to be the growth of the offense. It's going to be, is there another level for Bobby Witt Jr. to get to? Does Vinny Pasquantino return
to form,
looking like the same hitter that he was when they called him up 2 years ago?
Or even like he was in April last year.
Yeah, before the shoulder started going bad on him. Was Nelson Velasquez's power real that he showed? Can somebody in center field provide some pop? Was what Freddie Fermin did last year, is that replicable? Is there another level for him to get to? Can Salvi stay Salvi? There's a lot of questions on that offense, and it's hard to think that all those questions are going to be answered in the affirmative, but I still think there are some intriguing enough pieces. Melendez, the second half MJ Melendez had after a miserable first half last year.
Yeah.
Will the real MJ Melendez still stand up? I'm speaking of guys who I'm still holding on to some stock, even though not, if he's going to be the everyday left fielder, man, shield your eyes. Like, watching MJ Melendez play the outfield should come with a parental advisory warning.
Yeah, it ain't pretty. The infield and catcher spots, I'm actually pretty confident or comfortable with. Like Witt, Pasquantino, Garcia, the combination of Frazier and Massey at second, like I can live with that. Salvi and Fermin as your catchers, assuming Fermin is, again, playable as your number 2 catcher. Like, I actually like that group quite a bit, but I'm as high on Vinny as anyone. If you're going to assume Nelson Velasquez is your DH, and I'm still looking at Craig Brown's roster projection here, and he's got Velasquez mostly playing as your DH. Fine.
He's not much of an outfielder either.
No, in outfield, what a change. What a change in a very short period of time from a bunch of dudes who can't hit but are really good fielders to actually, like, the fielding is getting worse and worse.
These guys might be able to thump, but they should be allowed to use a laundry basket to try and catch the ball.
But, like, the 4 outfielders he has listed, assuming you just put Velasquez in as DH, Kyle Isbell, MJ Melendez, Hunter Renfroe, Drew Waters. I like the Renfroe signing. I do. That group sucks. That's not a good group because I am.
Look, Isbell has to play every day because he's the best defensive outfielder in that bunch, and if he plays center, he's gonna have to cover. He's gonna have to Kelly Leak it around out there in center field, and he's really good.
He is, and if Kyle Isbell's hitting 9th for you,
that's probably fine.
You're fine. You can live with that.
You just can't have 2 other guys hitting like Kyle Isbell, 7 and 8, and that was too often what was happening last season.
No, I don't think. What can Waters give you if he's starting it somewhere? What can Renfroe be this year? Like, is he? Because last year was a bit of a down year for Hunter Renfroe, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he's going to strike out a lot. He's a
Royal, all right.
It's going to probably look like a Salvador Perez type of year.
Like last year, Renfroe, his OPS plus was 91. He's about 9% worse than your league average hitter. His on base was under 300. Yeah, this is a Royal, all right. 31 doubles. 416 slug, like he'll thump it. He had 20 homers, 31 doubles last year. I mean, he can hit. It's just if the ball's not hitting the bat, you're not squared up. You're not getting anything. So I like the idea of signing Hunter Renfroe. I think there is something you can get out of him. I mean, if he's your 7 or 8 hitter, I feel really good about it.
He ain't not much of a defender either, but he's got a really good arm.
Great
which
arm.
Is more than I can say for a lot of the guys they ran out there in right field last year, like Eduardo Olivares, who
oh man,
current Pittsburgh Pirate. I don't know. Like, you really look at the roster, there's some pieces that I really like. They've got more stability in the pitching rotation, in the bullpen. That's going to help, I think, more than people maybe realize. Their floor is substantially higher. If you start from what their runs scored and runs allowed suggest, which is that they were a mid-60s win team and not a mid-50s win team, then if you start from that understanding of who the Royals are, then you see that there's a bit less of a mountain that has to be climbed to get them to that like mid to high 70s, which would at the bare minimum keep them hanging around. And you don't need to be, you catch a few breaks and you hang around in that division all year, and it's something to be excited about for a change, something to get people out to the ballpark. And there just haven't been a lot of reasons to do that the last few years.
I'm fired up about that. You have a reason to get out to the park. Coming up on the other side of this break, we've got What Is Wrong With You, and then Michael Swain will join us for Jayhawk Weekly. with you time on 580 Sports Talk, brought to you by Top City Metal Supply. You know the drill, folks. They cut the metal you need to your specifications, and that saves you time, money, and material. So never settle when it comes to metal with Top City Metal Supply, located on South Topeka Boulevard, halfway between Frito-Lay and Forbes Field. New week of What Is Wrong With You, since we didn't have a show yesterday. Dan, why don't you go first with yours today?
All right, we got a guy putting things up his butt. 60-year-old kilt-wearing man in Texas arrested last week after he was caught on surveillance footage from an antique shop, allegedly grabbing several items off the shelves and placing them in his rectum before returning them to the shelves.
Oh, God.
Mitchell C. Vest was taken into custody on one count of criminal mischief in connection with the bizarre allegations. According to a news release from the Harris County Constable Precinct 4 office, deputies on February 15th received calls from multiple concerned citizens. I'd be concerned regarding an adult male who they said was observed selecting items from multiple vendors at an antique mall outlet and placing them in his rectum. The male was then observed removing the items.
What a horrible word.
Yeah, damn near killed him. The male was then observed removing the items and placing them back on the shelves. A probable cause affidavit obtained by Law and Crime identified some of the items allegedly tainted by Vest's actions, pun absolutely intended.
Oh, my God.
As a makeup brush, a restoration hardware piece, an antique bottle opener, and a tobacco tent can.
Oh.
The incidents allegedly occurred at two different shops, both of which are on Town Drive in Spring, Texas, on the afternoon of February 10th. Per the affidavit, the owner of the gallery told deputies that she witnessed Vest pick up the makeup brush and hardware piece, shove both items up his rectum, then return the items to the shelf. She said the value of the damaged items was $130. The owner of the Curiosity Shop on February 10th reported to deputies she'd reviewed security footage showing a man matching Vest's description, doing the same thing with the bottle opener and tent can, noting that her damages were $74. Both complainants advised they had to throw away the items that were used in the incident. You can imagine why and what might have been on them as a result of this man's actions. Both complainants wished to pursue charges. Vest was released from the Harris County Jail on Friday after posting a bond of $100. Now, not strong enough for Rectum Man. Like, walking around wearing a kilt for the express purpose of having easier access to your, you go to the store and you instantly think, which of these things will fit in my rectum?
I can't do this.
Do we even need to do another story?
Well, this one, even with half as many details, probably wins. So it's okay to burn our other story on this. I just got a story about a moron out in the elements today. A 22-year-old man from New Hampshire who officials said made, quote, poor choices, was rescued from Mount Washington amid dangerous winter conditions, including high winds and temperatures as low as negative 52 degrees. The New Hampshire Fish and Game Law Enforcement Division said the call from the hiker came in at 11:50 a.m., reporting he had fallen, had an injury, and needed help. Poor reception limited the information that the 911 call could obtain, but coordinates showed the man was off trail in a drainage ravine west of the West Side Trail, north of the Crawford Path. Officials said with little information to go on, an emergency response was put together, a rescue response, with a plan to use the mountain's cog railways to get rescuers up the mountain using a special train with a snowblower to get all the way to the top. A second call then came in from the hiker, but he could not be heard, according to the department. On a third call, they finally were able to determine he was no longer at the original location, but has made his way to the Lakes in the Clouds hut and was in the emergency shelter, still in seek of help. Eventually, the rescue crews got there with winds of 90 miles an hour, a wind chill of negative 52, and an ambient temperature of negative 9.
Yeesh.
The department said these conditions do not allow for exposed skin and require proper gear to survive it. So eventually they got there. It took them multiple hours to warm this dude up. He was suffering from hypothermia, also frostbite, and all of his clothes were frozen, as were his shoes.
Jeez.
Apparently,
you are not tougher than the cold.
No, you will not beat weather. that is one thing.
Mother Nature undefeated.
Yeah, you are not going to beat weather. Apparently, there were other groups of hikers who were retreating down the mountain while he was going up, and he still continued the climb. 173 people have died in the Presidential Mountains range.
Ugh.
Yeah. So this guy's dumb. Very, very stupid.
But he didn't put anything in his rectum.
No, Can we say butt?
Yeah. That's what I've
this word
said
is
but.
too much for me.
Yes.
I can't do.
Guys, it's in the story.
I know. We can edit.
Why am I the bad guy here? I didn't put anything in my rectum.
All right, that wins. We can get out. Oh my god.
So should we cut that for later? What he just said?
Yeah, I think the FCC is going to allow it, but damn, I might not.
I meant cut what he said. What Dan said.
Oh, save it as a drop.
Yeah.
All right, that rectum guy is our winner. I need a shower after that story.
Rectum damn near killed him.
That wins today in What Is Wrong With You. Brought to you by Top City Metal Supply. Metal cut to order and you need it. Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard. What a degenerate.
Now I am fleeing from the damage I have caused.
Dan's on his way to the Birdcage for our Lewis Toyota Tuesday Night Hoops doubleheader. We have Jayhawk Weekly with Michael Swain coming up next to clean up this mess here on 580 Sports Talk. Joining us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline for Jayhawk Weekly is Michael Swain, who covers the Kansas Jayhawks for Fog.net and 24/7 Sports. You can find him on Twitter at mswain247, and of course, all of his great work covering KU at Fog.net. Michael, before we get started with KU today, I have two quick questions for you. Number one, do you remember your career as an arts and culture writer?
I wouldn't call it much of a career, but I think I did write a couple things for the Kansan back in the day on the arts and culture side of things. Yeah.
Second question, your thoughts on the legendary rock band Linkin Park?
Oh, yes. You found that article. Yeah, Linkin Park was my favorite band growing up, and is still one of my favorite bands. So, yeah, I think I wrote something about that. Man,
Yes.
I can't remember what year it was, but yeah, I love Linkin Park.
Yeah, let me take you back, Michael, and I was joking about this earlier. Michael and I briefly, one summer, were coworkers at the University of Daily Kansan at KU. Monday, July 24th, 2017. And I found it.
Oh, wow.
My wife and I are moving, Michael. So I was digging through some old, I didn't even know I had this. And I found Michael Swain's tribute to Linkin Park frontman Chester Bennington after he passed away. I was digging through and reading these last night, Michael, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to talk to him tomorrow. I can't wait to bring this up.
That's so funny. Yes, I do remember writing that. Yeah, that was after Chester passed away. So yeah, that was Linkin Park, big part of my childhood. That's hilarious that you found that.
Yeah. Also hilarious is I wrote a column for this same edition of the Daily Kansan, in which I believe, if I can find it here, was titled, "It's Time to Believe in Kansas Football." Michael, do you know what KU's record was in 2017?
Not good. I'll tell you that much. I can't remember the exact number, but it wasn't good.
1-11. They went 1-11.
Oh.
So it's time to believe that it was somehow going to get worse than 2016. Yeah, so that that'll tell you all you need to know about my career as a columnist in the college newspaper world. Michael, appreciate you traveling down memory lane on that one. I was so excited to find this and cleaning out our closet last night. As for the Kansas Jayhawks, might as well start on the football side because we had breaking news at the top of the hour. KU has its new offensive line coach, and he is an old pal of Lance Leipold, Daryl Agpalsa. What do you know about the new KU O-line coach?
Yeah, so he worked with Lance Leipold at Wisconsin Whitewater, and then was a part of Leipold's early staff at Buffalo, and worked under Leipold, and then took a job at Northern Illinois, where he's worked for the last few years. And obviously, his departure is what created the pathway for Scott Fuchs to take that offensive line coaching job at Buffalo. So, look, in terms of the hire, you're looking at someone that's got experience working with Lance Leipold. And I think that is really important because Leipold has talked a lot about staff continuity. And yes, there has been some staff departures this offseason, but this is someone that knows Leipold, knows what Leipold's expectations are, has worked with other members of this staff. And I think that's really important here, where the ability to step in and not have this period where this coach has to learn what it is like to be in Leipold's program, right? There is a bit of lag there. And, Leipold said himself that at times when you hire outside people, you have to spend time coaching them on how to coach because you have a certain way you want things done. And that's not going to be the case here because you look at what he's going to understand, right? He's already worked with Leipold for multiple years at different stops. He's familiar with the staff, and it should be a pretty seamless transition for him to come to Kansas. So I think it's a strong hire for KU, considering the point in time where a lot of offensive line coaches at this point have signed their contracts for next year, and that will obviously include buyouts and things like that. But for KU, I think this is a good hire, all things considered.
Yeah, and I have to imagine, too, to be able to find anyone of any level of quality, let alone someone who knows the system so well, knows the expectations of working for Lance Leipold at this stage of the game, that's pretty incredible, I think, all things considered.
Totally. Well, look, Baylor just had two of their assistants poached by Alabama. This is happening, right? KU's not the only school that has lost assistants this late. And I think the fact that this hire was made so swiftly, right? We're not even a week removed from kind of the more or less official word coming out that Scott Fuchs is going to leave to go to the Tennessee Titans. And the fact that, we're Tuesday and they're already there and, to the point where, it can be leaked, so to speak. I think that shows that, Leipold moved quickly, had an idea of where he wanted to go. And I think that's what you need at this point in time, where now he's going to get a couple weeks to get settled in Lawrence before spring ball starts in March.
We're chatting with Michael Swain, who covers the Kansas Jayhawks better than anybody else for Fog.net and 24/7 Sports. That's where you can find all of his great work covering KU. Go find him on Twitter as well, at mswain247. On the hardwood, Michael, KU picked up a really important win on Saturday, going on the road, beating Oklahoma. At this juncture, Michael, like personally, I'm not all that pressed about the Big 12 title race. I mean, it is what it is. We've heard Bill Self talk about the unbalanced schedule and all these other things. This is a team that is more built for March than it is for February. So all of that being said, how important was it for this team to just see that they can win a game on the road?
Well, I think it's important because you look at what KU found in the second half there. And the advanced numbers, right, aren't going to say that KU is a terrible defense. I think that just some of these games have led for opposing teams to kind of go crazy, and that's going to happen when you're playing at home, right? KU had the game against Houston where they shot at an unbelievable clip, right? This happens when you play at home in college basketball. But I think what KU found in the second half there defensively, doing some stuff, moving Hunter Dickinson and KJ Adams around a little bit, I think that is a more important thing that Kansas found than maybe even the end result, because teams are going to try and attack KU a certain way. It's just like how teams tried to attack KU when they had, Big Dave at center. It's really, ball screen and then trying to move the ball to whoever is the tag man is guarding. And that I could explain a lot better than that. But basically, it's one of these deals where KU guards a certain way and teams really try to exploit it. Well, KU adjusted, and all of a sudden now, Oklahoma couldn't do anything in the second half compared to what they did in the first half, right? They went, 7-12 from 3 in the first half, 1 for 11 in the second half. And a lot of that's because those shots became contested, where in the first half, there was a lot of open looks. And I think that sort of development for KU is so huge because in March, if Kansas does come up against a team that shoots 3 really well, they've got this in their back pocket, and they have adjusted this before, and the players are going to have maybe a little bit better feel in that situation. So I think overall it's a big game for KU, maybe not even so much because of the actual result, but I think just some of the things they found and maybe some of the confidence they can take from it.
How badly did Hunter Dickinson need a big game? Over the previous 3 against Texas Tech, K-State, and Baylor, only winning one of those 3, he was shooting something like 34.5% or so. Yeah, 34.7% from the field in those 3 games. And against Tech, I mean, everyone has a bad night. That was an awful, awful night for Hunter Dickinson in that game. How badly did he need to get off the schneid in that game against OU?
Yeah, I think he needed it. I think what he needs more is this stretch of 10, 11 days where he's going to play one game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is someone that has, you hear the word gravity used a lot in the NBA when they talk about, LeBron James, Steph Curry. Well, that is kind of the same impact that Hunter Dickinson has had for Kansas, where opposing teams go into games against KU, and the number one priority is get as many people around Hunter Dickinson as possible to make life as hard as possible on him. And I think that started to take its toll. And Hunter mentioned after the Oklahoma game that, he's had some niggles and some injuries that he's been dealing with that maybe haven't been publicized. So I think for him, it's big that he got that game, because obviously I think he's not the best big man he's going to go against, but in terms of finding a rhythm, finding a groove, I think that's important. But again, I also look at this time off for him this week. I think it's going to be really big for him.
And Michael, obviously a big win on the road for them in that game. How do you think that road win propels them for their final 2 road games against Baylor and Houston later on down the stretch?
Well, I was looking today, and K's not won at Baylor since that great Udoka Azubuike game there, where he had I think it was 23 points, 19 rebounds, 3 blocks, like just an iconic performance from him. And I was kind of surprised to see that KU hasn't won there since the 2020 season. So it's a place for KU that has not been great. And I think Baylor has been a strong team at home, and they're not going to play like they did against KU a couple weeks ago, where it looked like they didn't know how to dribble a basketball. Like, that's going to be a hard game. And obviously, I think we saw last night just how good Houston is at home. So I think theoretically, this time off can give KU a bit of a chance to reset, get those legs back, and really attack the final couple weeks of Big 12 play. But to say I am expecting Kansas to win both of those games, I think that'd be not far-fetched, but I'm not going to bet my money on that, just because those are really good teams. And even if KU did beat Oklahoma on the road, I think going to beat Baylor on the road or going to beat Houston on the road is just another level that I think KU has to show it before I can believe it.
Michael, when it comes to the tournament this year, and KU right now, most places, I know the bracket matrix has KU very solidly as the number 2 seed. I know most of the big name bracketologists have KU as the number 2 seed right now. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. How badly does KU need to play close to home when it comes to those games? Like getting Omaha the first weekend, obviously for media, that's nice because everyone can travel there and fans can travel there. But, KU, that's a bus trip. That's not very far to get to Omaha from Lawrence. Whereas, second weekend, we're talking regionals. Right now, it looks like KU might end up in Los Angeles, or it might not end up in the closest spot to home. Do you think the location, and I know Bill Self always downplays this when it is inevitably asked of him, but do you think that is going to make a difference for this team this year, given how much KU has struggled away from Allen Fieldhouse?
Well, I think it'll help because if KU does play in Omaha, right, that's going to be a pretty pro KU crowd. I'm really interested to see Iowa State, right? And if Iowa State, I think they're also one of the teams that will probably compete for a spot there in Omaha. And obviously, Iowa State fans will travel well. But, if Iowa State does not make it to Omaha and you're looking at it being more out of region teams, I mean, those two games are going to be home games for KU, just considering the fan support that KU is going to have there. That's going to be really important because I think for this team, so what are the questions, right? Well, I think a lot of people are comparing it to 2019, and that's a team that lost in the second round. Well, this KU team, when there's a home crowd, a lot more energy, a lot more intensity, and that can help in a second round game when maybe you're playing against a team that is decent. And then you're looking at then for KU, well, Bill Self gets time then before the Sweet 16, and we know how good KU has been when they get to the Sweet 16, right? You give Bill Self extra time to prep, like that's a good result for KU. And then all of a sudden you're in the Elite Eight, and that's a one game to go to the Final Four. So I think for this year's team, like you play it out in your head. And I think playing close to home is important because the bus trip's great, but more so because the fan support. And yes, there are KU fans everywhere across the country, but there is a concentration in this area. And I think there's a big opportunity for KU to be able to take advantage of that if they are in a place like Omaha.
Final couple of questions for Michael Swain of Fog.net. This is Jayhawk Weekly here on 580 Sports Talk. Texas coming up this weekend, 5 o'clock tip-off. It'll be on Big ESPN in Lawrence at Allen Fieldhouse. You get the home crowd for that one. A couple of big games coming up every game of the Big 12 is a big game, but Texas and BYU coming up within the next week. BYU a week from tonight, in fact. What does KU have to do to beat this Texas team? A team that I don't think is all that great, but they've got plenty of talent, and they've got guys who can give you a lot of trouble. What is KU going to have to do to make sure they knock off the Longhorns at home?
Well, I think the big thing for me, and this will be probably a theme, is that KU just can't have those stupid stretches where the guys just turn off mentally, and you see it happen. I think sometimes when KU's at home, where guys will just kind of flip out, and all of a sudden 4 turnovers will happen, and the other team's going to go on like a 9-0 run. Like those are the types of things that Kansas has to avoid against Texas because this Texas team has been better on the road than they have been at home at times this season. And it's a team that's got some athleticism. It's got some good guard play. And I just think for KU, it's going to be one of those games where they got to show up. They got to be turned up. And then they've really got to avoid those stretches where they allow other teams back into the game because we have seen KU pull ahead in some games. And then there are just the moments that are avoidable that allow other teams back into it. So I think that's a huge key for KU in these 2 home games, right, against Texas and BYU, because if Kansas can avoid those moments, all of a sudden you're looking at the opportunity, if KU does play well in other phases of the game, to have more maybe comfortable wins where, hey, maybe DeJuan Harris isn't having to play 38 high-stress minutes. Maybe Kevin McCullough, with the bone bruise in his knee, maybe he's not having to play 38 high-stress minutes. Maybe it's more like 34 minutes and it's kind of 30 high-stress minutes. I think those are the types of things for KU in this little, I don't know if you want to call it a homestand, but this little stretch of 2 home games. Like, I think those are going to be the things that are really important for this team because the depth isn't there. And I just think it's the time of year where you got to be very, very conscious of the minute load on this guy.
What do you think right now is KU ceiling?
Well, we all watched the 2022 team go and lose some awful games at the end of that Big 12 play, right?
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if people thought that team was going to go on to win the national title. This team has a talent to go on and win, 6 games in March because we've seen what Kansas can do on the biggest stages, right? They beat UConn at home. They were able to beat Tennessee on the shortest rest I think Kansas has had in years. Like, they beat a Kentucky team that, albeit has not been great, but is still incredibly athletic, incredibly talented. So this is a team that can win those big games. I'm almost more concerned about KU in the games in the first weekend, because I get the feeling, at least for me, like if Kansas is in this second weekend, the Sweet 16 is a time where Bill Self has time to prep. That's great. And then it's a one game, and Kansas has been great in those one game samples. So I think as long as KU can not be in UConn's region and make that a Final Four or national championship type of game, I don't think there's anybody in the country who I'd say on a given night Kansas can't beat. And so I just think for this team, like, you can't say they can't win the national title. They've got an insane amount of talent. But if you told me they lost in the second round because they had to go somewhere random, in the West Coast for the first weekend, like, I believe it. So I think this team definitely has a range of outcomes that I think makes it hard to predict.
For more of Michael Swain's fantastic coverage of the Kansas Jayhawks, go head over to fog.net. It's part of the 24/7 Sports Network. Go be a VIP. It is absolutely worth the cost. Also, go follow Michael on Twitter at mswain247. He joins us every Tuesday at this time on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline for Jayhawk Weekly. As always, Michael, we appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Sounds great, guys. Talk to you later.
That's Michael Swain from fog.net. Great stuff, as always, on all things Kansas Jayhawks, and a little trip down memory lane as well. That does it for Jayhawk Weekly, and that'll do it for the 4 o'clock hour of 580 Sports Talk. We're off early today, so we'll get to our 580 Sports Talk headlines, a final word, and then we'll send you off to Lewis Toyota Tuesday night hoops between Seaman and Shawnee Heights with Dan and the coach. That's all coming up in the final hour of 580 Sports Talk. is the final hour. Not really half hour, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. I don't know. It's final however long we're on here on 580 Sports Talk before we send you off to the Birdcage at Shawnee Heights High School for our Lewis Toyota Tuesday Night Hoops doubleheader. It is our final regular season Tuesday Night Hoops this year, and it is our penultimate regular season high school hoops broadcast here on 580 WIBW and FM 104.9. Hard to believe that the end of the regular season is already here. I'm Brendan Dworzinski. That's Spencer Dupuis, by the way. Dan Lucero is getting ready for our high school hoops broadcast doubleheader tonight, along with the coach, Larry Latimer from Tecumseh. We will have a full sweeping slate of coverage for you from sub-state basketball coming up next week. We will have games for you whenever we can get games on for you. You guys know the drill. When K-State plays, whether it's the men, the women, we've got other obligations. Obviously, we'll get you K-State basketball. But whenever we have an opportunity to get you sub-state basketball and the week after state tournament basketball, we are going to do so as much as we possibly can. So you'll hear plenty from Dan, obviously, tonight and Friday, along with the coach tonight and Friday. You will hear from Dan and the coach coming up next week for a handful of sub-state games. Spencer will be on the call for a couple of sub-state games as well. Don't know exactly what they will look like. It all depends on the start times and all that. We're hoping to get doubleheaders darn near every night if we can. We'll get as many finals in Friday, Saturday as we can as well. Again, little inside baseball. We like to give you guys the inside scoop when K-State plays. Well, we play K-State, so that's how it works. But as long as we can get you guys high school hoops postseason games, we will get them to you. That includes the state tournament. Looks like we got a great chance to get a couple of teams to Class 5A. Would love to see at least one make it to 6A this year. I have a pretty good feeling we're going to have at least one team represented at 3A down in Hutch. So one way or the other, we are going to get you as much coverage as we can. We have folks who, always ask, hey, are you guys going back to doing the full state recaps? Unfortunately, times have changed away from that, but we still will do as much as we can for as many local teams as we can across the state once we get to state tournament week, just 2 weeks down the road. So be listening. Check out 580WIBW.com and the 580 Sports Talk Twitter page coming up this weekend. Once the sub-state brackets are announced, we will have our full broadcast schedule ready for you. So you can get prepared to know what games will be on our airwaves as the postseason approaches. How does West Virginia do tournament basketball? Like, is there because sub-state is essentially like regionals or a super regional and then onto the state tournament. Every state does it a little bit differently, though.
Very different.
How does West Virginia handle it?
So they split up the girls and the boys. So this is the final week of the regular season for the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the start of it's called sectionals.
Mm-hmm.
So you play within your section, and the ones that I covered, it was 3 and 3.
Sure.
So it was 3, and then the winners of that played the two winners. It was 2 regional games, and the winners of each regional game went to the state tournament.
Interesting.
So yeah, they went to it. Until I guess it starts next year, but until now, they had every other sport had 3 classifications,
mm-hmm.
but for basketball they had 4 classifications, and then I believe it was a total of 8 teams in each classification would go down to the state tournament.
Gotcha. Yeah, our setup here in the state is there are, and I think for the smaller classes, and correct me if I'm wrong here, there are 8 sub-states for each one, and in the smaller classes they all play at the same place. Like we've done them from Silver Lake, we've done them from Perry-LeCompton, we've done them from all over the place, where it'll be everyone just plays in the same place. The bigger classes, a lot of the schools are more congregated here in town or in the Kansas City area down in Wichita. You just play whoever the higher seed is, wherever they are located. So 8 sub-states, the winner of each one moves on to the state tournament, and you get your 8 quarterfinalists or your 8 participants in the semi or in the first round of state. Then you've got the semis and the championship round. So it's a blast. It's one of the best. It is, when you combine state and sub-state, it's probably my favorite 2 weeks of the year for high school sports in Kansas. Those of you who are the big track fans, have been down to Wichita for state track, might choose that one instead. I don't blame you because that is absolutely a blast as well. But we're excited for all the high school hoops and some big regular season games, including tonight with Seaman versus Shawnee Heights. Before we get you out to the birdcage, why don't we get to a handful of our 580 Sports Talk headlines for today? A lot of them have to do with people getting fired or leaving their jobs under other circumstances. I didn't realize this while I was fleshing out some of these ideas today. A lot of people moving on, retiring, getting fired, etc. So we'll get to a couple quick ones here from the college sports world. This was a big one. So a couple of athletic directors lost their jobs or changed jobs yesterday. Joe Parker, who had been at Colorado State for several years, he is out. He has effectively been fired. There are a lot of people who believe Colorado State had their football program taken a different turn under Joe Parker. They may have gotten an invitation to the Big 12 in the group that brought in this year's newcomers, BYU, Cincinnati, UCF, Houston. Maybe Colorado State would have gotten a nod. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way. They are still out in the Mountain West. Meanwhile, at Missouri, how about this bizarro story? Desiree Reed-Francois, she's been the AD at Missouri for about a year. She's leaving Missouri for Arizona, where she is going to make less money. She's going to get paid less per year, at least to start, at Arizona than she was at Missouri. Now, she got her law degree at Arizona, but does your law alma mater have that kind of pull? Sounds like there's this new oversight committee that has been created to have its hands all over athletics, to have oversight and to check in and have checks and balances and whatnot. It sounds from people in the know at Missouri like this is more so people
out of here.
People at the administrative level are trying to have too much reach and oversight into athletics, which has led Desiree Reed-Francois to essentially say, all right, I'm not going to deal with that. I don't know if they don't like her. I don't know if she just doesn't want to deal with having a boss or a group of bosses like that. So she pieced out. And Missouri athletics, save for their basketball program being an embarrassment to Dr. James Naismith and the very sport of basketball this year, they've been trending in a good direction. So I'm not going to cry for Missouri athletics, but yeah, very, very bizarre story there. So a couple of fairly high-profile athletic directors changed or lost their jobs yesterday. Kind of a weird day for college sports. What's your first headline for today?
My first headline is, do we want to stay in the college ranks? Or
let's do it.
All right. The format for the new college football playoff has been announced. It is an interesting one. Let me pull it up here. It was up, but then I exited out of it on accident. There's gonna be a 12-team playoff like everybody wanted, but it'll be kind of like the 5 and 7 rule. So 5 conference champions and then 7 overall.
Yes.
Bids.
So the way it's going to work when you talk about the 5 conference champions, it'll be the 5 highest ranked conference champions. This will not include the Pac-2. So Oregon State, Washington State, they do not count as a conference.
So then what? I didn't get that far into it. What's the 5th conference going to be?
Whichever one's highest ranked. So it'll guarantee that a G5 school gets in.
Which is a good thing, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. So, if it was, I don't know, Tulane or Air Force or whoever is the highest ranked conference champion is guaranteed to get in. Out. So it'll be your Power 4, Big 10, Big 12, SEC, ACC, and then the next highest. Which I think is positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's my first headline is the 5-7 format confirmed. We didn't know, it kind of been rumored about. So now that we know, and they finally resolved that. So that's going to help the media rights deal, I believe, too, get finalized as well for them.
Yes, it was reported that was done last week. Maybe it wasn't officially, fully, completely done. But yeah, it's effectively done. And now it'll be officially checked off now that they've got this format settled on. This is probably the best you could have done. I mean, realistically, if we wanted to make this a true playoff, the way you would do it is you would have all conference champions. Yeah. And what? 1 or 2? I don't know exactly how the math would work out. I think you'd go with 10. Well, now that they get rid of the Pac-12, I would go with 9 conference champions and 3 at-large bids. That's how I would do it. If you're going to say the conferences and conference championships have to matter, then make all of them matter. But I know that they will never listen to me on this, and it bothers me that what is best is not going to be listened to, but I've had that complaint about the college football playoff since they founded the damn thing.
Yeah, not a headline, but we talked about it last week, the headline of Ohio State's basketball coach getting fired. Mm-hmm. Do you know who was on hand at I believe they were playing Purdue this weekend?
Was Chris Holtman there?
No. Bob Huggins was.
Was Huggy Bear there? Okay. Hey, listen.
That was a lot of rumors online circulating because he was there.
If Ohio State hired Bob Huggins, I would be shocked. I just
thought it was funny that I said something about it being a potential landing spot. And where was he this weekend? At their game.
Spoken into existence. How about that? Next up for me, let's just get to a couple of coaching moves here real quick. We already mentioned it earlier today when we talked to Michael Swain of Fog.net. KU has its new offensive line coach. His name is Daryl Agpalsa. I'll double check the pronunciation of his name. He previously worked with Lance Leipold, both at Wisconsin Whitewater and at Buffalo, before taking over as the offensive line coach at Northern Illinois starting in 2019. So he knows Lance Leipold. He knows the expectations. He knows a bunch of other guys who are still on this coaching staff. That's a win for KU. A big L for Iowa State, though. Nathan Scheelhaus, who played quarterback. He's from Kansas City. He went to Rockhurst. Played at Illinois, and now for a few years has been the ace recruiter, especially in the Kansas City areas, and offensive coordinator for Iowa State. He has left Iowa State. He is now going to be a passing game assistant for the Los Angeles Rams. Another high-profile college football coach moving on to the NFL and getting out of the college game. And I don't know how many of these, you look at Scheelhaus at Iowa State or Scott Fuchs at Kansas and say, hey, maybe it's just, there aren't that many opportunities to get into the NFL. I'm going to take one while I have the chance. Hard to blame a guy for that, but it's a trend at this point. And I don't think there's any way to deny or overlook the fact that this is a trend and it is something that is going to continue throughout college sports. And as we continue into this scarier and scarier era for coaches of what college football coaching looks like. Any other headlines for you?
Yes, I have one. It's a headline that, it's one of the things we talked about last week about the Kansas City Chiefs shooting at the parade. It's kind of a feel good one, even though it's a good ending to a very sad story. Lisa Lopez Galvin, who was the radio DJ who was shot and killed last week, she was wearing a Harrison Butker jersey that afternoon. The family requested a new one to place her with in her coffin, in her casket. And Butker had one delivered to the funeral home this week. So
cool move by him.
It's a good move by him.
Yeah, that's a cool move, and had a very heartfelt statement about it too. Just horrible situation, and doesn't get any better, but it's very nice by so many of the Chiefs who have gone out of their way to try to brighten people's days and take care of them in this sad time. That's going to do it for our 580 Sports Talk headlines. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back, wrap things up with the final word here on 580 Sports Talk. We've got to get you out to Tecumseh for Lewis Toyota Tuesday Night Hoops. So real quick, Spencer, a final word.
It appears the MLB has an owner's problem, and it's not just
Agreed.
It's throughout the whole world of MLB owners, and they're trying to add new teams. I don't think that's a good thing, but the Nats aren't selling, and I'm very not happy about it. That's my final word.
I bet we'll get to some of those MLB realignment rumors coming up here in the near future. Final word for me today, K-State, man, I like the guys on this team. I love Jerome Tang. I wish things would get better, but until they learn how to space the damn floor and clean up the offense at all, I don't have very high hopes for the rest of this college basketball season in Manhattan. That does it for 580 Sports Talk. We're back with a full show tomorrow from 2 until 6. Until then, for Dan, for Spencer, I'm Brendan. Lewis Toyota Tuesday Night Hoops are coming up next here on 580 WIBW.